Chapter 26:18. While pondering, Lin Sun walked towards the outside of the city. He, Xiang Xiaoyuan, and Yuduchio had agreed to act separately this time. The reason was simple. He didn't want to implicate the two of them with his murderous aura. Whoosh! Outside the city, Lin Sun's figure flashed and arrived at the starry sky. He stepped forward and flew towards the god's relic that looked like a butterfly's wing. At this time, cultivators could be seen everywhere in the starry sky. Great emperors, ancestors of one Tao. It was not uncommon. And at the forefront, there were dozens of terrifying immortal auras emerging. They must be the immortals who entered Chaotian City recently. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and became vigilant. At this moment, he had already changed his appearance. He didn't need to worry about being recognized, but he didn't dare to be careless. Once his identity was seen through, those enemies who hated him would take the opportunity to attack him without hesitation. After all, this was no longer Chaotian City. The starry sky was bright and dazzling. Divine rainbows swept out from the god's relic and covered the entire universe. Quick, we can enter the god's relic by following this crack. A shout came from the front. Many figures were teleporting along a crack that extended from the god's relic. They were teleporting over at an incredible speed. Along the way, they didn't encounter any danger. They quickly disappeared from the god's relic. Damn it, the god's relic is stopping us from entering. Suddenly, an angry voice resounded through the universe. At the forefront, an immortal with white hair and beard had a gloomy expression. Let me try. At the same time, a man in green spoke. Chi. He waved his sleeve, and a treasure flew across the sky. It was a copper seal that was overflowing with light. It was plated with a thin layer of light, immortal gold. It was dazzling and filled with immortal aura. As soon as the copper seal appeared, the sky collapsed. Its power was so strong that even ancestors of one Tao were terrified. It was enough to crush a group of existences like them. Without a doubt, the man in green was an immortal. He acted immediately to break open the crack and enter the god's relic. Clang! However, something shocking happened. A mysterious streak of divine rainbow shot out from that crack, blasting the copper imprint apart. One had to know that even the sky had been destroyed by the copper seal, yet the treasure had been sent flying so easily. The most terrifying things were still to come. That crack shone, and the natural laws were terrifying. An expanse of brilliant multicolored light swept out, striking that copper imprint again. Bang! An earth-shattering explosion resounded as the bronze seal that emanated an eternal aura was damaged. This treasure was clearly extraordinary. It was branded with the presence of an undying substance, and it could be said to be an immortal Tao soldier. An eternal true world, this sort of treasure could be said to be terrifying and incredibly rare. But now, this green-clothed man's copper seal was destroyed. It made everyone's heart ache. It was truly a pity. However, it was also because of this that everyone realized that not everyone could enter the god's relic. Boom! More undying beings took action, but they didn't dare activate their treasures out of fear of being destroyed, only releasing a great divine ability. That crack didn't change, surging with a magnificent multicolored mist, neutralizing his divine ability. In addition, there was an extremely powerful recoil force that swept towards that undying being. He dodged, but the starry sky behind him collapsed in an instant. Everything turned to dust. Seeing this, all the undying beings were terrified, their expressions changing drastically. Everyone, let's attack together. An undying being shouted. These existences had recently arrived at Chaotian City. At this time, they could be said to be the strongest group of existences. Facing a great fortune like the god's relic, how could they be willing to stop here? All right, Tao brothers, let's attack together. Someone responded. In the next moment, the group of undying beings activated their skills, displaying unparalleled divine abilities, gathering their strength to attack a great crack in the void. However, in the end, they were all neutralized by the power of the god's relic. Moreover, it released a terrifying divine rainbow light that forced those undying beings to continuously retreat. Now, everyone understood that the undying beings were rejected by the god's relic and couldn't enter. Many emperors let out sighs of relief. If they had to fight against the undying beings for the fortune, it would be no different from throwing their lives away. Now, the undying beings couldn't enter, and the fortune within the god's battlefield was fated to have no fate with them. Let's go. We can't delay any longer. If this path of survival disappears, we won't be able to enter again. Let's go. Many cultivators took action and teleported through the starry sky, and they quickly vanished from the god's ruin. Where's that Lin's son? Why don't I see him? Come out if you have the guts. Suddenly, just as Lin's son was about to move, a lazy voice resounded through space like thunder. Extremely far away, a gray-clothed man stood sloppily, his eyes like sharp blades sweeping the surroundings, appearing extremely arrogant. It was Nan family's Nan Tianzheng. What are you shouting here for? What if you scare that guy away and he hides in Chaotian City? Won't we lose the chance to kill him then? The silver-haired old man, Nan Yongchang, frowned and scolded Nan Tianzheng. Hurry up and move. Don't miss this fortune. As long as Lin Sun dares to appear, it won't be too late to kill him then. I'm just worried that he'll flee without a fight. Who knows if he really has the guts to appear in the god's relic? Nan Tianjing muttered. Although he said that, he still immediately took action and soon disappeared. Far away, Lin Sun's black eyes were indifferent as he firmly remembered this Nan Tianjing. At the same time, he also noticed that Nan Yongchang, Nan Tianzheng, and other Nan family members weren't acting alone, but together with the three immortal emperor clans, Gu clan, Li clan, and Yun clan. Unfortunately, there was no figure covered by the cloud curtain. Shaking his head, Lin Sun didn't delay and also took action. However, when he approached the rift that stretched out from the ruins of the gods, he actually suffered resistance and rejection. Lin Sun frowned and didn't force his way in. Before taking action, he left Cyan Sparrow in the inn, but there were still Ling Xuanzi and Kong Ju in the Tower of Endless. This scene made Lin Sun wonder if it was caused by Ling Xuanzi, the fourth senior brother, or Kong Ju. But before Lin Sun could react, an obscure power spread from his body and immediately resolved the rejection of the crack. Lin Sun's pupils suddenly shrank. This was the power of Jade Plate of Fate. The Jade Disc of Good Fortune contains the order of the immortal Tao from the last era, and the God's Relic is a remnant from the last era. Could there be some sort of connection between the two? Lin Sun seemed to be lost in thought. Without any delay, he stepped on the crack and teleported away in an instant. The God's Ruin that looked like a butterfly's wing was actually a vast and dazzling galaxy with space-time currents surging within. When he teleported over, his entire body seemed exceptionally small, like a grain of sand that had fallen into a giant whirlpool, uncontrollably drawn in. Lin Sun felt nothing but darkness in front of him, and then he lost his senses as if falling into chaos. After an unknown amount of time, Lin Sun only felt that his body suddenly sank, and an irresistible confinement force pressed on his body, which made him unable to circulate his Taoism. He suddenly opened his eyes. In his field of vision, there was a vast expanse of white immortal mist. He couldn't even see his own fingers in front of him. Beneath his feet was a hard and damp limestone. The limestone slabs were mottled, and the aura of time was astonishing. It was quiet nearby. He couldn't see the sky or the earth. It was all white all around. It turns out to be the power of the rules of heaven and earth here. Lin Sun immediately realized that the force that oppressed him and confined his Taoism came from this mysterious world, and there was no danger. However, he couldn't use his cultivation at all. Even his divine awareness couldn't spread out. This made Lin Sun frown. If he couldn't use his cultivation, if he encountered any danger, he would be completely finished. After sensing in silence for a long time, Lin Sun stepped forward. The limestone slabs under his feet were more than 2 feet long, like a path leading to the depths of the white, immortal mist. Fortunately, no mishaps occurred all along the way, and no mishaps occurred. Besides the limestone path beneath his feet that seemed to be endless, only the boundless mist that existed everywhere remained. Is this really the god's ruin? After 30 minutes, Lin Sun gradually frowned. He found nothing and saw nothing. Everything was quiet, as if he was the only one left in the world. What the hell is this place? Until 2 hours later, suddenly, in the depths of the white mist in the distance, there was an angry curse. But soon there was no sound. Lin Sun thought to himself, could it be that everyone who entered the god's secret realm is walking on this limestone road like me? If so, it was relatively safe. At least, everyone's cultivation was in a state of suppression, so even if they met enemies, there was nothing to be afraid of. Before long, another voice sounded, strange. Strange, why is the god's ruin like this? Why is there nothing else except the limestone road under our feet? It's unsettling if the power of confinement is not lifted. Let's go. Maybe everything will return to normal when we leave this damn place. Hearing these voices, Lin Sun became calmer. Since everyone was in the same situation, there was no need to worry about any danger. God, what is this? Is it the central immortal palace that is rumored to be the most supreme in the last era? Hurry up! A wave of exclamations of shock sounded out from the extremely far-away mist, and it revealed excitement, as if they'd noticed some extraordinary scene. Lin Sun couldn't help but speed up. Not long after, his vision suddenly changed. The white mist became thin, but he could still see the scene in the distance. The first thing that came into his sight was an immortal palace that stood above the clouds. It seemed to be made of immortal gold, and it emitted brilliant immortal light. Chapter 26:19. It was indeed an immortal palace that stood high above the ninth heaven. Its whole body was bathed in dazzling immortal light, and there were millions of divine lights falling down. Vaguely, one could see a plaque made of strange immortal gold hanging on the immortal palace, central immortal court. On both sides of the stone pillars, 2 lines of brilliant great way immortal characters were engraved. They were overlooking the stars like a blue sky falling, striking the golden bell, the gathering of immortals. Towering over the clouds, like the sky, beating the jade drum, thousands of gods come. Every word was like a gem, piercing through the 9 heavens and 10 earths. When Lin Sun saw the central immortal court for the first time, he couldn't help but be shocked. That place was simply the dwelling place of gods, and the place where immortals discuss Tao. It was too sacred. Could the supreme divine treasury of the last era be hidden in the central immortal court? It's rumored that in the immortal civilization of the last era, the central immortal court ruled the 4,900 continents of the immortal world and was the supreme existence of the immortal way. I didn't expect that the rumor was true. Look, is that the battlefield of gods? There was a burst of exclamation nearby. Lin Sun looked up and found that with the central immortal court as the center, 49 bluestone paths emerged in the surroundings. At the end of each bluestone path, there was a petal-shaped Taoist field. Each Taoist field was extremely large, paved with immortal stones and divine jades, and covered with a strange and mysterious aura of the immortal way. At this time, there were already thousands of figures standing in the 49 Taoist fields. Impressively, they were the practitioners who had entered the relics of gods earlier. At the end of the bluestone path where Lin Sun was, there were also hundreds of figures standing in the Taoist field. There were men and women, old and young, and their cultivations were different. At this time, all eyes were looking at the central immortal court in the distant sky, and they were discussing animatedly with different expressions. Lin Sun walked straight forward without changing his expression. He had already noticed that the oppressive power of rules still hadn't disappeared, which meant that he couldn't use his cultivation. He wasn't the only one in such a situation, and it was the same for other practitioners present. Otherwise, these guys who had arrived in advance would have rushed to the central immortal court at the first time to fight for the fortune in it. This is the battlefield of the gods. When Lin Sun set foot on the Taoist field at the end of the bluestone path, he immediately saw a huge battlefield floating in the sky not far from the Taoist field. It was large enough for two great emperors to fight in it. One could see that it was completely light golden in color, as if it was forged from divine gold. At the same time, numerous laws of order were inscribed on it. The ground of the battlefield was soaked in the color of dried blood, and it hadn't faded even after tens of thousands of years. It was a horrifying sight. There were a total of 49 battlefields like this, and they were spread out not far from each of the dojos. According to the ancient records of my clan, every 100,000 years in the last era, the Central Immortal Court would hold a battle of the Heaven Chosen. The winner of the battlefield of the gods would be able to enter the Central Immortal Court and obtain a supreme inheritance. An old man said in a low voice. Many people were familiar with this legend. It was said that those who could participate in the battle of the Heavenly Chosen were the strongest existences in the immortal world. They were known as the overlords of an era. It was a real battle between peerless figures. It was known as the most brilliant, hot-blooded, and intense battle in the immortal world. At that time, peerless gods, peerless beauties, and beautiful fairies would enter the battlefield of the gods. It could be said that heroes would fight for hegemony, and thousands of flowers would compete for beauty. And the one who could fight his way out of the battlefield of the gods would be the chosen one of that era. He would be able to enter the Central Immortal Court, stand proudly at the peak of eternity, and achieve ultimate transcendence. Lin Sun had also heard of these legends, but he didn't expect that this grand event from the last era might be true. It seems that in order to reach the Central Immortal Palace, one must go through layers of selection and battles in the battlefield of the gods. Someone muttered. It was said that the battle of the Heavenly Chosen from the last era had many rules. The first stage was called Arena Defense. In the 49 dojos, the contestants would fight in the arena. As long as one could obtain 9 consecutive victories in the battlefield of the gods, he would stand out and enter the second stage, Great Hunt. The duration of the arena defense was 7 days. During the 7 days, even if one was defeated, there was still a chance to fight again. After 7 days, the arena defense battle would come to an end. What was worth mentioning was that as long as one successfully defended the arena, they would receive a generous reward. And those who could go through the selection and enter the Central Immortal Court would obtain the supreme fortune hidden within. Thinking of this, many people's emotions surged. And here I thought that the god's relic was very dangerous, known as the #1 forbidden zone, with no chance of survival. But now it seems that it's just an arena battle. Someone laughed. If it's just an arena battle, that would be great. Someone's eyes were filled with worry. The rumored arena defense battle was a battle of life and death. This was even more terrifying than encountering any danger or mishap. After all, if one wanted to obtain 9 consecutive victories, casualties were unavoidable. And this was only the first stage. It was said that the casualties in the second stage, Great Hunt, would be even higher. Who can be sure that what we're facing is the battle of the Heavenly Chosen from the last era? You should know that the last era was already destroyed. Someone was skeptical. When you arrive here, you already have no choice. Didn't you notice that everyone's cultivation has been suppressed? This is the rule of the battle of the Heavenly Chosen. No one is allowed to fight without permission. Someone explained softly. 49 dojos, 49 battlefield of the gods, 7 days of arena defense battle. Does this mean that just the first stage will eliminate more than half of the competitors? Someone sucked in a breath of cold air. Many people's expressions also changed slightly. Lin Sun heard all of this and thought to himself, this rule is not bad. At least I don't have to worry about sneak attacks. Oh, that guy actually came a court death. Suddenly, a surprised voice sounded. In front of this dojo, a handsome man in a gray robe turned around and looked at Lin Sun playfully. Lin Sun, the nearby powerhouses who were looking at the Central Immortal Palace and the battlefield of the gods, also noticed Lin Sun, who had just arrived, and couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. Not long ago, the discussion about whether Lin Sun would appear in the god's relic caused a lot of discussion in Chaotian City. The reason was that there were too many immortal emperor clans who wanted to kill Lin Sun, not to mention old opponents like Wan, Hung, Luo, and Zhu. Just the 4 Eastern Imperial clans were enough to make people's hearts turn cold. They were the behemoths of the 7th heaven. If it was anyone else in Lin Sun's position, how would they dare to enter the God's Relic? But Lin Sun came here. This was beyond many people's expectations. At this time, Lin Sun's cultivation was suppressed, so he naturally showed his true appearance, which was why the handsome man in the gray robe, Nan Tianzheng, recognized him. Before entering the God's Relic, you asked me if I had the guts, and now you say that I came to court death. In that case, when the battle begins, don't be a coward. Lin Sun's expression was indifferent, and his words were casual, but his killing intent was obvious. Nan Tianjin couldn't help but sneer, and his eyes were as cold as a sharp blade. He said, "This is what you said, only life and death, not admitting defeat. Don't worry, even if you admit defeat, I won't spare you." Lin Sun's expression was as usual. Humph. Nearby, Nen Yongxiang snorted coldly and said, "Tianzheng, don't waste your breath on a dying man. When the battle begins, just take his dog life." There were many practitioners of the Nan clan nearby. At this moment, they all looked indifferent and looked at Lin Sun as if they were looking at a dead man. This made many people tremble. Needless to say, if the battle began, Lin Sun would definitely become the target of public criticism. Old bastard, those who humiliate others will be humiliated by others. Don't blame me for not reminding you that in the battle, I will definitely cut off your head. Lin Sun sneered. Nan Yongxiang didn't hide his killing intent towards him in front of the battle tablet, so he could take this opportunity to behead him. Nan Yongxiang's face turned green, and his killing intent surged. Unfortunately, there was no deterrence at all. All the people present were suppressed, so he could only stare at Lin Sun. Lin Sun is sharp-tongued and boastful. He doesn't even know that he is about to die. It's a pity that I'm not in the same Taoist field as him. Otherwise, I will be the first to kill him. Suddenly, a cold and indifferent voice sounded in the distance. Lin Sun looked up and saw a valiant man in an emperor's armor with long hair looking at him from a Taoist field in the distance. His face was full of killing intent. "Whose trash is this?" Lin Sun asked, very puzzled. He really didn't have any impression. Everyone looked at each other. That was Li Feijing, the 8th-level emperor of the Li clan, an unparalleled, ruthless man whose fame was even greater than Nan Tianjing's. But Lin Sun directly threw the word trash at him. "Presumptuous? How dare you? Lin Sun, you should be hacked to pieces." In the distance, many people around Li Feijing cursed angrily, even more agitated than Li Feijing. "A bunch of trash." Lin Sun casually threw a sentence at them. This time, everyone could see that Lin Sun clearly did it on purpose. Just as he said, those who humiliate others will be humiliated by others. There were a total of 49 Taoist fields. At this time, the cultivators distributed among them also noticed this scene and saw Lin Sun's existence. Some of the immortal emperor clans who had long hated Lin Sun couldn't help but sneer. This guy obviously didn't understand his own situation. As for those who had no enmity with Lin Sun, they all had different expressions. It was fine if he was arrogant in the past, but to clamor in front of the battlefield of gods. Wasn't he courting death? This Lin Sun was really as unscrupulous as the rumors said. Some people admired Lin Sun's astonishing courage, but they could only admire him in their hearts. They didn't dare to say it out loud, for fear of being implicated. There was no other way. Almost all of these 49 Taoist fields had enemies of Lin Sun. This was really a target for all. However, it was in such a situation that Lin Sun said leisurely, "Why don't you raise your hand one by one and tell me your name so that I can remember it? Otherwise, when I die, I won't remember who you are." Chapter 26:20. His words resounded through the surroundings, and it caused everyone to be stunned. After that, it was like they'd poked a hornet's nest, causing a wave of furious curses to resound from all directions, and it was directed at Lin Sun. "You're really tired of living." Everyone heard that. "It's this fellow who's courting death. If the heavens desire death, then it will definitely make one go mad. Lin Sun, I'll watch how you're slaughtered with my own two eyes. All sorts of threats and furious curses covered the heavens and the earth. Lin Sun paid no attention to them, and his expression remained tranquil like an ancient well. He swept his gaze over and committed the owners of those voices to memory. Some were familiar enemies, and some were completely unfamiliar faces. Suddenly, he noticed that the cultivators in the vicinity of where he stood had instinctively moved far away, and they seemed as if they were deeply afraid of being implicated by him. It was human nature to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. Lin Sun didn't really take it seriously. But once the arena battles began, then he would absolutely not hold back if he encountered these people. Time flowed by. More and more cultivators walked out from the boundless white mist and arrived at the 49 dojos. Lin Sun noticed that some people had tried to change dojos, yet they were obstructed by a shapeless force, and it caused them to have no choice but to stop. Obviously, the 49 dojos didn't interfere with each other. This meant that if the battle of arena defense were to begin, then the enemies he had to face would be the cultivators on the grounds he resided in. Clang! Suddenly, a wave of the sound of a bell that sounded like the sound of nature resounded. On the stone pillar at the side of the central immortal palace where the words "Strike the Golden Bell" were inscribed, a bright golden image of a bronze bell surged into appearance and glowed brilliantly. Instantly, the battlefield of the gods before the 49 dojos seemed as if it had awakened from eternal silence, and it emanated a boundless and thick aura of battle that suffused the world. At this moment, all the cultivators that stood in the dojos sensed a strand of a miraculous mental force. The arena battles. Life and death. The time limit was 7 days. No one would wait beyond the time limit. In an instant, all the spectators were stirred. Everyone realized that the rumors were actually true. The miraculous mental force caused the rules of the arena battles to appear in the hearts of all the cultivators, and it allowed them to instantly come to an understanding. Fighting in the battlefield of the gods, I can't use any power other than my own cultivation and natal treasure. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Obviously, this meant that some of his trump cards couldn't be used. If he wanted to defend the arena successfully, he could only rely on his own strength to fight. Ha ha ha! Lin Sun, without your trump card, what are you going to use to threaten the One Dao ancestor? Nan Yongchang was the first to laugh loudly, extremely delighted. Other people present also looked at Lin Sun in a subtle way. In the past years, Lin Sun had killed many Tao ancestors, but almost all of them were believed to have been killed by Lin Sun with some taboo trump cards. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to be a match for the One Dao ancestor with his cultivation of the 8th level of the Emperor realm. But now, in the battle of defending the arena, it was forbidden to use these trump cards, which undoubtedly weakened the threat brought by Lin Sun. Lin Sun didn't say anything, but he sneered in his heart. 18 years ago, it was indeed difficult for him to kill an Emperor ancestor in a head-on battle. But now, even if he didn't use the Nirvana Flame of Order, he could kill the Emperor ancestor easily. Why don't you speak? Ha ha! There is no way out now. You deserve to suffer today. Nan Yongchang laughed happily, full of complacency and ambition. Lin Sun couldn't help but laugh and let out a long sigh. Old man, if these are your last words, it is destined to become a joke for thousands of years. In the future, when the descendants of your Nan clans see these words engraved on the tombstone, I'm afraid they will die of shame and indignation. Everyone, Nan Yongchang almost couldn't believe his ears. After a while, he was so angry that he laughed and pointed at Lin Sun. Little bastard, you Lin Sun interrupted. The more bullshit you talk, the faster you die. I really don't want to live. See you on the battlefield of gods later. Nan Yongchang's eyes widened. He only felt that his head was full of blood, and he was about to explode with anger. Elder, don't get angry with a dead man. I will kill him first later. Nan Tianzheng looked cold. Clang! Another bell chime resounded in the world. An expanse of gorgeous golden immortal light surged into appearance before the 49 Dao grounds, and it paved a path that led directly to the battlefield of the gods. At the same time, 7 stars appeared in the sky, shining brilliantly. They represented the 7-day deadline, and with each passing day, a star would be extinguished. The 49 Taoist fields became restless. Some cultivators who had been waiting for a long time rushed to the Golden Passage as soon as possible. Sure enough, in just a moment, they appeared on the battlefield of gods. However, before the arena battles could begin, the surroundings of every single one of the grounds were covered by a vast expanse of white mist, and it was as if they transformed into 49 completely isolated minor worlds. They couldn't see the scenes in the other Taoist fields, but no one paid attention to this. They all looked at the battlefield of gods in the distance. Everyone knew that only those who won 10 consecutive victories could enter the second level, the Great Hunt. The huge battlefield of gods was engraved with the traces of time, but it was still immortal and stood in the void. It would be the stage for hegemony. Lin Sun, get up here. A figure arrived on the arena first. Unexpectedly, it was neither Nan Yong Chong nor Nan Tianzhong, but a silver-robed man with a dignified figure and a cold look. He didn't hide his hatred at all. He was also from the Nan family, and his name was Nan Tianba. He was at the peak of the 8th level of the Emperor realm, not much weaker than Nan Tianzhong. Tianba, you are too impatient. Nan Tianzhong couldn't help feeling helpless that he couldn't be the first to get on the arena. Nan Tianba said, "Brother, don't use a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. I can deal with Lin's son." His voice was full of conceit and pride. "Well, Tianzhong, you are already famous. It's time to give Tianba a chance to make a name for himself. Lin's son is notorious for his misdeeds. Killing him can barely be regarded as a stepping stone for Tianba." Nan Yongchang said, twisting his beard. The other cultivators on the Taoist sanctum didn't say a word and consciously took a step back. Everyone could see that the Nan family was determined to eradicate Lin's son as soon as possible. Then you have to be careful. Although this person can't use some trump cards that can threaten the Emperor ancestor, his combat power can't be underestimated. Otherwise, it's impossible for him to leave his name on the Xian list. To deal with him, Nan Tianjing warned. Although he wanted to kill Lin's son, he obviously didn't underestimate Lin's son and appeared very calm. But before he finished, he was interrupted by Nan Tianba with a smile. "That's enough. I already know this. Brother, I left my name on the Xian list thousands of years ago." He suddenly looked at Lin's son. "What are you waiting for? Get up here and die." His voice was like a clap of thunder, resounding through the universe. Clang! A brilliant violet spear appeared in his palm, and it emanated a peerlessly fierce glow that caused his figure to seem like a peerless god of war, with a domineering aura that shot into the sky. Many people's expressions changed. This Nan Tianba seemed a little arrogant, but he was obviously a ruthless person with unparalleled strength and terrifying cultivation. At this moment, Lin's son walked up the golden path, and his tall figure instantly appeared on the battlefield of gods. At this moment, the power of rules that suppressed his body disappeared, and his cultivation was like an ancient fierce beast awakening, surging and roaring all over his body. Feeling this familiar power, Lin Sun couldn't help but let out a satisfied sigh. Boom! Nan Tianba waved the purple spear and attacked immediately. He was obviously impatient and didn't intend to waste the slightest time. He wanted to kill Lin Sun and make a name for himself. The void exploded. The purple spear waved and rolled up a dazzling and violent waterfall of lightning. Faintly, countless stars collapsed in it, creating a scene of destruction. Boom! This attack was indeed too fierce and overbearing, and the cultivators in the distance couldn't help but reveal a surprised expression. Nan Yongxiang twirled his beard and smiled, and his eyes revealed a look of admiration. Nan Tianzheng also nodded secretly. It could be seen from this attack that Nan Tianba wasn't careless. He directly used his real strength and released his cultivation to the extreme. Boom! On the battlefield of gods, the thunder rumbled, and the purple light accompanied the purple spear. At this moment, Nan Tianba was like a god, giving people a strong sense of oppression. Lin Sun stood still, his breath indifferent, and he didn't move, as if he was frightened by this sudden attack. It gave people the feeling that he would be completely smashed in the next moment. The contrast between their auras was too great. Seeing that the incomparably overbearing attack was imminent, Lin Sun didn't move, but the purple spear suddenly stopped in the air in the rain of light and couldn't move any further. And Nan Tianba's rushing figure suddenly stopped, as if he had hit an indestructible barrier, and his figure almost couldn't bear it. His pupils suddenly shrank. In the Taoist sanctum, everyone was also shocked. No one knew when Lin Sun had firmly grasped Nan Tianba's halberd with one hand. His white and slender fingers were like the shackles of heaven, making the purple halberd unable to move an inch or move. Everyone's face changed. How could such a terrifying attack be caught by Lin Sun with his bare hands? This scene was completely beyond everyone's expectation. Open! Nan Tianba shouted and urged his cultivation to the extreme, so that his figure was steaming with endless purple light, surrounded by countless purple laws, and his whole body seemed to be burning. However, the purple spear still didn't move. Not good. Nan Tianba's face changed completely. When he was about to abandon the spear and use other means of fighting, he saw, as Lin Sun exerted force on his wrist, he suddenly twisted. Nan Tianba's purple spear flew out of his hand, and his whole body was uncontrollably dragged towards Lin Sun. At the same time, Lin Sun slapped out. Crack! An incomparably resounding slap resounded. Nan Tianba was sent spinning like a spinning top by this slap. He spun more than 10 times in the air before fiercely smashing into the ground a few hundred meters away. His entire body twitched violently as blood spurted out from his nose and mouth. His cheekbones were broken and caved in. The whole battlefield of gods trembled violently. This slap simply shook the heavens and the earth, and it shook the universe. P.S. There is an emergency. Goldfish is out. Don't wait for me. Chapter 26-21. Nan Tianba was dumbfounded. This slap simply shattered his pride, face, and lofty character, and he felt an unprecedented humiliation. Since he started cultivating, he had never encountered such humiliation. Moreover, he was sent flying by a slap at the beginning of the fight. On the dojo, hundreds of cultivators felt pain in their hearts. Their guts trembled, and they could not believe it. They were both peerless figures who had left their names on the Xian list, and they were both peak 8th level emperors, but Nan Tianba seemed a bit too weak. Nan Yongqiang's face was ugly, and he was bewildered. Nan Tianzheng clenched his fists, and his eyes were cold. This slap was filled with great humiliation. It made them feel ashamed, and they felt an indescribable chill. This Lin Sun, how could he be so strong? It was true that Lin Sun was ranked first on the wanted list, but in the eyes of the immortal emperor clans from the 7th heaven, this so-called wanted list was issued for the cultivators of the vast thousand worlds. Since ancient times, who had ever seen an immortal emperor clan's powerhouse being wanted? It was true that Lin Sun had killed more than one emperor ancestor. But all the inferences and rumors said that Lin Sun had achieved this by relying on some trump cards. But now, the power of rules in the battlefield of the gods did not allow such external forces as trump cards to appear. This also meant that the battles in the battlefield of the gods were the fairest fights, and the cultivation and combat power of the two sides were compared. But now, the power displayed by Lin Sun's slap clearly had the power to crush Nan Tianba. This completely exceeded the expectations of Nan Yongqiang and the others. I'm going to kill you. Nan Tianba roared, and his long hair danced wildly as he rushed towards Lin Sun. Boom! On his body, purple thunder and lightning evolved into a strange talisman. Various laws of thunder interweaved to form the sun, moon, mountains, and rivers. As soon as it appeared, it emitted a destructive aura. Great Sun and Moon Thunder Talisman. This was the condensation of Nan Tianba's talent power. In the 7th heaven of the eternal world, this talent was rated as a top-grade 8-star talent. It was extremely terrifying. Once it was used, it was like wielding the thunder of heavenly punishment, suppressing all evil. The void shook and was covered by blazing thunder. The great sun and moon thunder talisman was like a heavenly tribulation, enveloping Lin Sun. Lin Sun grasped the purple spear and thrust it out casually. Boom! The talisman exploded above Lin Sun's head, and thunder and light rained down. Lin Sun was completely vulnerable. Tianba, retreat! Nan Yongqiang shouted, and his old face changed. How could he not see that Nan Tianba was no match for Lin Sun? However, it was too late. Lin Sun's figure flashed, and he rushed forward. The purple spear in his hand was like a sharp streamer, tearing the sky and producing a deafening explosion. The bone-piercing, dangerous aura caused Nan Tianba's body to stiffen. His expression greatly changed as he sobered up from his rage, but it was already too late to retreat. Condense! He let out a roar, and his eyes turned red. Boundless, profound light burst out from his body and condensed into a light shield. The silhouette of the black tortoise was faintly discernible, and it gave off an indestructible aura. Xuanwu Overbearing Shield. It was a supreme technique that was passed down in the Nan clan. Its defensive strength was extremely formidable, and once the black tortoise appeared, even ghosts and gods would find it difficult to break through. Boom! When the purple spear arrived, it was visible to the naked eye that the black tortoise shield shook violently. Then it produced countless cracks and exploded. The unparalleled sharpness of the spear pierced through Nan Tianba's protective combat power layer by layer, and the light rained down like a waterfall. Then, with a puff, the spear pierced through Nan Tianba's body, bringing out a handful of scarlet-hot blood and sprinkling in the void. The power of one blow broke the black tortoise shield and pierced through Nan Tianba. The overbearing and bloody scene shocked everyone in the Taoist field. Their scalps were numb, and they almost stopped breathing. How could this be? Damn it! Nan Yongqiang and other strong practitioners of the Nan clan cried out in disbelief with their eyes wide open. On the battlefield of gods, Nan Tianba's face froze and his eyes widened. Looking at the purple spear piercing into his body, he suddenly felt a great irony. This spear was originally his natal monarch weapon, but it had now become a lethal weapon that had defeated him. You won't be the first to die. Why are you so anxious? Lin Sun sighed softly. Before his voice died away, he raised the purple spear, and Nan Tianba's body was also thrown into the air. Bang! Nan Tianba's body exploded, and blood rained down like a waterfall. An 8th-level emperor of the Nan clan of the 7th heaven was killed by his own spear, and his blood splattered in the sky. This scene made Lin Sun's tall figure look like a demon god. It also made the Taoist field fall into silence, and everyone was shocked. Everyone was stunned, and their eyes were in a trance. Too strong. In this battle, Lin Sun showed absolute power from the beginning. Whether it was slapping Nan Tianba away or killing him with a spear, he was clean and neat, and Nan Tianba couldn't struggle at all. Not to mention resisting. Even if he risked his life, it would be futile. It was also at this time that people deeply realized what it meant to have a great reputation. Lin Sun could be famous in the vast 1,000 battle domains, and he could run amok all the way to Chaotian City. It was not as simple as a few trump cards. Whoosh! On the battlefield of the gods, a golden immortal light emerged and swept into Lin Sun's body. This was a mysterious token. If he defeated an opponent, he would get a ray of immortal light as a token. When he won 9 battles in a row, the immortal light would turn into a message talisman, and it would become the token to enter the second round. Great hunt. Lin Sun completely ignored the murderous gazes of the Nan clan and started to clean up the spoils of war. Nan Tianba's storage ring and various emperor weapons in his natal emperor world were all collected by Lin Sun. A dignified 8th-level emperor, a noble of the Nan clan, only has these few treasures on him. Isn't it too shameful? After finishing the inventory, Lin Sun couldn't help but frown. The Taoist field was silent, and everyone had a strange look in their eyes. Nan Tianba was dead, and it was fine that his belongings were taken, but he was also criticized like this. This was too much of a bully. Nan Yongxiang and the other Nan clan members were so angry that their lungs were about to explode. Little bastard, break. I'm going to kill you right now. Nan Yongxiang was about to go to the battlefield of the gods, but he was stopped by Nan Tianzhong. Let me do it. Nan Tianzhong said every word as if squeezed out from between his teeth, revealing a bone-chilling, killing intent. Nan Tianjing's expression was even colder and scarier. Tianzhong, Tianba is already dead. You can't have any more mishaps. Let me do it, Nan Yongxiang said. Although he was furious, he knew very well that ordinary people couldn't be a match for Lin Sun. No, let me do it. Nan Tianjing's eyes were as cold as a knife. I've cultivated for 10,300 years, and I'm only one step away from the 9th level of Emperor Ancestor Realm. If I retreat now, my state of mind will definitely be shaken. Without this invincible will, how can I forge the path of Emperor Ancestor Realm? Nan Yongxiang's expression was uncertain, and he was extremely hesitant. On the battlefield of the gods, Lin Sun sneered, "You really talk a lot of nonsense. Didn't you say the most before? Don't waste time. Come up and accept your death." His voice was full of sarcasm, which made the clansmen of the Nan clan seething with anger. This damned Lin Sun was too arrogant. You also saw how domineering and insufferably arrogant he is. If I don't kill him, he will definitely become my inner demon. As he spoke, Nan Tianzhong stepped straight onto the golden corridor, and his figure instantly appeared on the battlefield of the gods. Tianzhong, be careful. Nan Yongxiang couldn't help but remind him, a little worried. Boom! Nan Tianjing's gray robe fluttered, and his thin figure suddenly became majestic and dazzling. Endless dark cyan laws interweaved and condensed into a cyan sun above his head, illuminating the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Looking closely, the cyan sun gave people a sense of perfection, glory, and immeasurable, which meant that his cultivation in this realm had truly reached perfection. Just as he said, he only needed an opportunity to reach the Emperor Ancestor Realm. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and said, I hope you can hold on a little longer. Otherwise, it will be too boring to kill. Nan Tianjing's expression was cold, and he said, Don't worry, on my path of cultivation, you are destined to be a stepping stone. Clang! An impassioned and loud, murderous sound came from the cyan sun above Nan Tianjing's head, shaking the void and making it tremble. Immediately afterward, a spear emitting terrifying Tao light slowly emerged from the cyan sun, and with every inch that was revealed, the terrifying Tao light blazed a little brighter. When the complete spear appeared in the world, everyone on the dojo felt a stabbing pain in their eyes, and their minds seemed to be shocked, giving rise to an inexplicable feeling of fear. Myriad Transformation Spear, someone exclaimed. Looking closely, the spear was 8 meters long and filled with monstrous Tao light. The body of the spear was like the spine that propped up the sky, and the tip of the spear was like a guillotine, dazzling and peerlessly sharp. Vaguely, a vague primordial Tao rune appeared on the spear, flickering in the Tao light, and its aura was boundlessly terrifying. No, this isn't the true Myriad Transformation Spear, but it has a faint charm that belongs to the Myriad Transformation Spear. Someone whispered. The Myriad Transformation Spear was the most precious treasure of the Nan family in the 7th Heaven region. It was rumored that it was born from the origin power of the Heavenly Order, and its power was unfathomable. Only supreme figures who had set foot on the immortal path could use such a treasure. Good. Nan Tianjing didn't lose his mind because of anger. Nan Yongxiang breathed a sigh of relief. Brother, kill him and avenge Tianba. The members of the Nan family even shouted and cheered for Nan Tianzhong, full of murderous intent. This spear is extraordinary. It can probably be sold for a lot of eternal void source crystals. In the battlefield of the gods, Lin Sun looked at Nan Tianjing's spear and said casually, When we fight later, I will be careful so as not to damage this treasure. If that happens, it won't sell for a good price. Everyone had a dumbfounded expression on their faces. The faces of the members of the Nan family darkened. This damn Lin Sun was too arrogant. Only Nan Tianzheng remained calm and said indifferently, "You want my spear, and I want your life?" P.S. My train of thought was a bit slow, so the second part was a little late. Chapter 26-22. Clang. The spear made a long, passionate sound. Before his voice died away, Nan Tianzheng had already launched an attack. His figure was like a bolt of lightning, like a cyan sun, rushing toward Lin Sun. Just that kind of power was not something that Nan Tianba could compare to. Lin Sun looked calm. Nan Tianzheng was indeed a tough guy, a peerless figure in the same realm. But for Lin Sun, his vision had already surpassed his peers. He could even suppress the Emperor ancestor. So how could Nan Tianzheng compare to him? The only thing that pressured Lin Sun was that the spear in Nan Tianzheng's hand was indeed a rare life Emperor weapon. It was full of unparalleled killing intent and was extremely powerful. Boom! The light of the way filled the sky and broke through the clouds. On the battlefield of the gods, layers of ripples of the great way appeared and intertwined in the void, turning into an invisible defensive force. It was these restrictive forces that had been engraved in the last era that prevented the aftermath of the battle from sweeping out. Otherwise, it would have caused an unpredictable disaster. The battle between Lin Sun and Nan Tianzheng produced the most brilliant sparks as soon as they clashed, gorgeous and beautiful. The battle between the two was too fast. Lin Sun's fist and palm prints, and Nan Tianzheng's spear collided in the void. It was a confrontation between wisps of the Great Way, accompanied by a scene of creation. In the end, they rushed past each other and separated into two parts of the sky. They both looked back at each other, their eyes as cold as lightning, frightening people's souls. The two confronted each other indifferently and hostile. Many people's hearts were beating fast. This was really a rare battle. They were both peerless 8th-level emperors. It was an unprecedented battle that belonged to this realm. The next moment, they collided again, as fast as two bolts of lightning. Nan Tianzheng opened his mouth and spat out a seal. It was the power of interweaving laws, dazzling. The sky and earth trembled, as if the universe had been destroyed. The four directions were unstable, and the earth, fire, wind, and water appeared at the same time. However, no matter what kind of cultivation method he used, it was easily resolved by Lin Sun. Everyone was shocked. Lin Sun's combat strength was too incredible. He was unarmed and was only at the middle stage of this realm, but he could fight against Nan Tianzheng, who was at the perfection realm. It was unimaginable. Kill! Nan Tianzheng's face was cold. He was like a glowing green sun, shining brightly. Raging flames surged as he walked over step by step. His aura was several times stronger than before. Everyone shuddered with fear. Obviously, Nan Tianzheng had utilized some sort of terrifying secret technique to multiply his combat strength. This was undoubtedly terrifying. Nan Yongxiang had a complicated look in his eyes. Although Nan Tianzheng's secret art could double his battle strength, it had a huge drawback. It would damage his Dao foundation. But obviously, in order to kill Lin Sun, Nan Tianzheng had completely ignored all this. Rumble. Nan Tianzheng stepped forward, his figure shattering the void. He was like a god burning himself to destroy everything in the world. He turned his body into a great sun and moved across the 9 heavens, covering Lin Sun below. He attacked continuously with his spear, producing an earth-shattering killing power. At this moment, Lin Sun frowned. He also felt a kind of pressure. He sensed the shocking transformation of Nan Tianzheng's combat strength and realized that the secret technique Nan Tianzheng used was very likely similar to Yazi's Fury and Battle Saint technique. It could double his combat strength in a short period of time. Nan Tianzheng became more and more relaxed. His power was tyrannical as he galloped through the battlefield, killing wantonly. It gave people the feeling that he had the upper hand. As for Lin Sun, he began to fall into a passive position. Lin Sun, you are indeed a great enemy. In the eternal true world, you can be called a peerless figure that is 1 in 10,000, but you are too arrogant. You don't understand what it means to say that there is always someone better than you. Nan Tianjing's eyes were indifferent. In the seventh heaven, existences like him had killed their way out of thousands of enemies. They had experienced all kinds of bloody battles to obtain their current achievements. Brother, quickly kill him. Leave his primordial spirit behind and refine it into a treasure. Let him beg for death for eternity. On the Taoist sanctum, some members of the Nan clan were excited and shouted with deep hatred. If these are your last words, it's appropriate. Now, I will let you see what you mean by, there is always someone better than you. Lin Sun, who had been in a passive position, suddenly chuckled. His tall figure suddenly stretched out, and he attacked from his passive position. His power was like a volcano that had been silent for countless years, and it erupted at this moment. This counterattack was too sudden, and no one expected it. Just as Lin Sun was about to be suppressed, he suddenly erupted, and his momentum suddenly became several times stronger. Boom! He attacked Nan Tianjung head-on, still barehanded, but the power was completely different from before. It was majestic, and every attack showed an unparalleled momentum. Under such an impact, Nan Tianjung was forced to retreat. His body was in pain, and soon his flesh was swept by Lin Sun's fist force, and traces of blood appeared. Nan Tianjing's expression immediately changed. At this moment, Lin Sun seemed to have changed into a different person. Was this his true power? Lin Sun crossed his fist with the momentum of hammering the sky. With a movement of his arm, the void collapsed, and the defensive power of the battlefield of gods was shaken. Not to mention Nan Tianjung. Even the spectators were moved and deeply shocked by such a scene. This turn of events was too swift, and it caught all of them off guard and caused them to feel disbelief. Kill! Nan Tianjung shouted and attacked with all his strength, trying to suppress Lin Sun again. That's all. Lin Sun sighed softly. Around Lin Sun's body, mysterious and unpredictable sword qi, like the flowing light of the universe, shot out in the battlefield of gods. In the deafening collision, Nan Tianjing's spear buzzed and wailed. He tried to dodge, but he couldn't. He was hit by the sword qi and began to be injured. First, with a puff on his left shoulder, a string of blood splashed high, and one of his arms was almost cut off. Then, with a crack, the feather crown on his head was broken. His hair was disheveled, and a trace of blood appeared on his forehead. In the Taoist sanctum, there was a burst of exclamations. The clansmen of the Nan family couldn't help but change their expressions and feel horrified. They were still expecting Nan Tianjung to suppress Lin Sun. But in just a moment, everything was reversed, and Nan Tianjung fell into a dangerous situation. You hid your strength so well. Nan Tianjing's face was gloomy. He thought that Lin Sun had reserved his strength and waited until this critical moment to kill him. It was too insidious and cunning. I'm just worried that the spear won't be sold at a good price if it's damaged, said Lin Sun seriously. Hearing this, a group of people had the urge to vomit blood. In such a life-and-death battle, Lin Sun still cared about these worldly possessions. This was clearly a mockery and provocation to Nan Tianjung. At the same time, people were also horrified. Lin Sun's combat strength had changed so much. They had all seen Nan Tianjing's strength. But even under such circumstances, Nan Tianjing's power was still suppressed by Lin Sun. At this time, in the battlefield of gods, Nan Tianjing's hair was disheveled, and he was injured in many places. He was very embarrassed, and his face was livid. Tianjung, come back, Nan Yongqiang shouted. He felt deeply uneasy. Lin Sun's strength was too strong, and he had exceeded his expectations again and again. I haven't lost yet. Nan Tianjung ignored Lin Sun. Covered with the power of Cyan Law, he swooped down at Lin Sun again. At this time, his frontal bone glowed, and a little red man appeared. Standing in front of his eyebrows, it shook a transparent spear and pressed forward. Lin Sun's whole body was covered with Taoist light and turned into a dazzling light. Like a big abyss, he struck forward. This was a fierce collision. The two had fought head-on for countless times. Secret skills competed with each other, and it was like two worlds colliding. From time to time, there were broken fragments of the law of great ways. However, it didn't take long for Nan Tianjing's entire right arm, holding the spear, to be broken. Bone fragments and blood splashed everywhere, and he groaned in pain. Tianzhong, Gu Yongqiang shouted. His face changed completely, and he became anxious. Retreat, retreat. Nan Tianjing's eyes flashed with deep unwillingness, but he also knew that it was futile to continue fighting. Instead, it was very likely that he would suffer. However, Lin Sun didn't give him a chance to retreat at all. The moment Nan Tianjing's right arm was broken, Lin Sun chased after him and launched a violent attack. On the battlefield of deities, Taoist sounds rumbled, and the power of the densely packed prohibitions tumbled. It could be imagined how fierce the battle was. Swish! Suddenly, like a flash of light, a rain of blood appeared in the sky. Lin Sun cut off one of Nan Tianjing's thighs, and blood was dripping. Everyone was shocked, and their scalps were about to explode. Nan Tianjing's face was beyond recognition, and he was hideous and twisted. However, he didn't risk his life. Instead, he exhausted all his strength to retreat. He wanted to escape from the battlefield of deities and set foot on the Golden Corridor. As long as he reached the Golden Corridor, it was equivalent to admitting defeat, and he would be protected by the prohibitions of the battlefield of deities. Clang! But at this time, Lin Sun activated the Wuyuan Taoist sword and slashed through the air. The unparalleled sword intent pressed down like a natural moat. Open! Nan Tianzhong roared, and his spear soared into the sky, releasing endless light. Crack! But under the Wuyuan Taoist sword, the spear was like a piece of paper. It was easily cut in two, and the sword light's momentum didn't diminish. It directly engulfed Nan Tianzhong. Boom! The sword chi roared, setting off a monstrous storm. Nan Tianzhong, the peak 8th Great Emperor, was killed, and his soul scattered. In the dojo, everyone was dumbfounded. Tianzhong, Nan Yongqiang's eyes were bloodshot, and he let out a furious roar. His whole body was trembling with anger. Nan Tianzhong was only one step away from stepping on the Golden Corridor. But it was this one step that caused Nan Tianzhong to die. The Nan family members were dumbfounded. It was as if the pride in their hearts had been shattered. Nan Tianba's death was a heavy blow to them. Now, even Nan Tianzhong, whom they had high hopes for, was killed. They couldn't accept this. Clang! Clang! The two halves of the spear fell on the battlefield of deities, and the sound was ear-piercing. Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh. I still couldn't protect this spear. What a pity. Scrap metal can't be sold for many void origin crystals. You. Nan Yongqiang was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He couldn't even speak. Chapter 26-23. No matter how angry the powerhouses of the Nan clan were, they couldn't change the fact. A ray of immortal light emerged and swept into Lin Sun's body, becoming the proof of his second consecutive victory. More than half of the hundreds of cultivators in the dojo were from the eternal world, but when they saw this scene, they couldn't help but be shocked and fearful. They finally realized why the Fu clan, an immortal giant from the 8th heaven, would take the initiative to recruit Lin Sun. To be able to leave his name in the top 100 of the Xian ranking, he was by no means comparable to an ordinary, peerless figure. Who else wants to come forward to die? On the battlefield of gods, Lin Sun spoke indifferently and glanced at the people of the Nan clan. It was as if he was choosing his prey, and the people of the Nan clan couldn't stand his gaze. You've gone too far. I'll kill you right now. Let me do it. The people of the Nan clan rushed towards the golden tunnel, and they were like fierce beasts with bloodshot eyes. But they were all stopped by Nan Yongqiang. His face was livid, and he said in a deep voice, "Can't you see? That little bastard wants to provoke you and send you to die. It's better to die than to be humiliated by him." The people of the Nan clan had ugly expressions. You have guts. On the battlefield of gods, Lin Sun raised his thumb, all talk and no action. Come, today I'll send all of you on your way. The people of the Nan clan became more and more angry, but in the end, they were stopped by Nan Yongqiang. Nan Tianba and Nan Tianzhong were already dead, and he couldn't tolerate the death of more people. Old bastard, you're the ancestor of a Dao. You've suffered such a great loss and watched your clansmen die. And you can only be a coward? Lin Sun looked at Nan Yongxiang with undisguised provocation. It wasn't that he was unforgiving, but as early as in Chaotian City, the four clans of the East Emperor, including the Nan clan, had joined forces and clamored to kill him on the battlefield of gods. Under such circumstances, how could Lin Sun be polite? This guy is actually provoking an ancestor of the Emperor realm? On the dojo, the cultivators were in an uproar and were extremely restless. The ancestor of a Dao was like a natural chasm that suppressed the Emperor realm. Even a peerless great emperor would find it difficult to fight against him. Since ancient times, countless extraordinary people had tried to break this natural chasm, but almost all of them had failed. But what do they see now? Lin Sun was provoking the Emperor ancestor. If it weren't for the ferocity Lin Sun had shown before, they would have criticized Lin Sun for being too arrogant and crazy. Good. Nan Yongxiang was furious as he spoke repeatedly, and he seemed like an infuriated, primeval, ferocious beast while his expression was ghastly and terrifying. I originally intended to kill you, but now it would seem like killing you would be letting you off too easily. Perhaps I can only refine your soul core and make you wish you were dead, yet unable to live. As he spoke, he stepped onto the golden passageway. Elder, you must avenge our two brothers. The clansmen of the Nan clan cried out in grief and indignation. Whoosh! A figure flashed before Nan Yongxiang appeared on the battlefield. In an instant, a strand of boundlessly terrifying aura of an imperial ancestor surged out violently from his body, and it caused the heavens and the earth to dim while the heavens and the earth trembled. His beard and hair fluttered while his sleeves fluttered, and his emaciated figure was like a mighty god that oppressed the nearby space to the point of exploding. Everyone in the dojo was shocked. In the eternal true world, an imperial ancestor was also a giant who could summon the wind and rain. He looked down upon the Emperor realm, stood above all living beings, and looked up to the mountains and rivers. Except for those immortal figures, the imperial ancestor should be respected, and Nan Yongxiang was by no means an ordinary imperial ancestor. He came from the seventh heaven. Not only was his status noble, but his cultivation was also unfathomable, enough to make any emperor realm feel despair. At least in this battlefield, if Nan Yongxiang defended the ring, almost no one would be stupid enough to fight with him. Nan Yongxiang's appearance did not cause any change in Lin Sun's expression. Everyone thought that the imperial ancestor who had died in his hands over the years was killed by some of his trump cards. Unfortunately, what the world thought was not necessarily right. And today, he would tell the world that the natural moat that almost no one could cross since ancient times could also be broken. Clang! A sword sound came from Gu Yongxiang. Immediately afterward, an ancient sword shot out directly from between his eyebrows and turned into a brilliant sword light. Like a swimming dragon, it cut the sky and shattered the sea of clouds. Gu Yongxiang's eyes were cold, like a divine sword that pierced the sky. He didn't waste his breath or delay in the slightest. He stretched out his hand to grab the ancient sword, and then he suddenly slashed down. Crack! The void of 10,000 feet cracked in front of the sword, and a huge crack appeared. The sword light that shot into the sky was like a divine sword that could cut the ninth heaven. It was as if the sky and the earth were all split in front of this sword. As soon as this sword appeared, everyone in the Taoist sanctum looked at each other in horror and turned pale. Strictly speaking, Gu Yongxiang could be called the Sword Ancestor. The Sword Ancestor? How terrifying was this realm on earth? Witnessing the sword that cut through the sky, everyone truly understood the terror of a sword ancestor. Compared to him, Nan Tianba and Nan Tianzheng from before paled in comparison and seemed very dim. Not to mention anything else, just Gu Yongxiang's first strike was enough to annihilate them. Because this sword strike was like the Milky Way descending from the nine heavens. It was vast and mighty to the point one couldn't see the end of it, and it was too powerful and terrifying. Good. Lin Sun's eyes shone brightly. Above his head, the abyssal sword cauldron appeared quietly, flowing with billions of rays of light. This was the first time he took out his life emperor weapon since he stepped onto the battlefield of gods. Inside his body, his cultivation was burning like a copper cauldron in a chaotic world. It was running to the extreme and roaring continuously, and the power of his whole body suddenly rose to an unprecedented level. "Open!" Lin Sun shouted, his black hair fluttering in the wind. In front of Lin Sun, a big abyss suddenly emerged, and the abyssal sword cauldron floated in it, firmly defending Lin Sun. When the sword chi rushed towards Lin Sun, the big abyss roared and swallowed the sword chi like a huge mouth. Then, the great abyss condensed the power of various great ways, and like thousands of indestructible hammers, it scattered the sword chi. The abyssal sword cauldron roared, and the power it released completely obliterated the sword chi that was enough to tear the sky apart, causing it to dissipate into nothingness. Many spectators widened their eyes. That was the sword ancestor of One Dao's furious sword, which could easily kill any great emperor. But now, in a head-on clash, it had been neutralized by Lin Sun, a peak 8th level great emperor. This was undoubtedly too inconceivable, and it completely overturned everyone's understanding. "Oomph." Gu Yongqiang coldly harumphed. His finger gently flicked on the ancient sword as if he was playing a pipa. Every time he flicked his finger, a small sword would appear. After 9 consecutive flicks, they turned into 9 flying swords. These 9 flying swords drew 9 long sword rainbows in the void, like the Milky Way across the sky, and rushed to Lin Sun. Whoosh! The space distance seemed to be non-existent in front of the 9 swords. In the blink of an eye, they were already in front of Lin Sun. Boom! The world was turned upside down, and the sun and moon were inverted. 9 streaks of sword light came one after another, making the abyss in front of Lin tremble violently. In the end, the abyss showed signs of collapse. The big abyss was the embodiment of Lin Sun's cultivation. One could imagine how amazing the power of the 9 swords was. Break! At this time, Lin Sun did not dare to neglect and started the abyssal sword cauldron. They launched an attack. Bang! Bang! Dense collisions sounded like thunder. The sword chi crisscrossed, and the light shone in the sky. The abyssal sword cauldron buzzed constantly. In a moment, the two had fought hundreds of times. In the end, with a series of explosions, the 9 streaks of sword chi were shattered by Lin Sun, with the abyssal sword cauldron one by one and collapsed in the void. In the Taoist field, people could not calm down at all, and their minds were in turmoil. Lin Sun was able to fight with the ancestor of a Tao head-on, despite the difference of one realm. This was like a miracle. If it was spread out, it would cause a sensation in the world. After all, in this battle, Lin Sun did not use his trump card, but fought with Gu Yongqiang with his own combat strength and life emperor weapon. The sword crosses the sky, disrupts the universe, and opens the door of life and death with one sword. With a cold voice, Gu Yongqiang suddenly moved. The ancient sword in his hand turned into a more brilliant sword light than before, and shot out again like a dragon soaring in the sky. Crack! The void was split in half by this sword. The terrible space was torn apart, and countless space storms poured out from it. The world was chaotic, and the pneuma was roaring, as if the world was boiling. Clang! Lin Sun resisted with the abyssal sword cauldron, and the power in his body tumbled violently. In the end, he seemed to be unable to bear the power of this sword, and he flew back directly. This sword defeated Lin Sun. Kill him, kill him! The people of the Nan clan shouted excitedly. Many people could not help but sigh. It was not easy to fight with the ancestor of a Tao head-on. It was very difficult for Lin Sun to break through this natural chasm. After all, he was only an 8th level emperor. How could he fight with the ancestor of a Tao? However, what no one expected was that, although Lin Sun was pushed back, he was not really suppressed. Instead, as the battle progressed, he became more and more courageous. On the contrary, Gu Yongqiang's expression became gloomy, and he looked very ugly. It seemed that he was embarrassed that he could not kill Lin Sun after so long. 10,000 to spare. Northern prison. 9 tribulations. Dark serenity. In an instant, Gu Yongqiang executed 4 ultimate attacks, and it dazzled and shocked everyone present. The battlefield of gods was torn apart by the strands of sword qi, and it transformed into an ocean of chaos. The might of the sword Dao was too terrifying. It was like a raging dragon that swept through the sky, and numerous pillars of sword qi that could support the heavens and the earth roared as they revolved, and they seemed as if they intended to completely slice the sky apart. Break apart. Enveloped by countless strands of sword qi, Lin Sun fought to the extreme. The glow of the Tao rumbled and surged around his body, and he exerted his utmost strength in an unprecedented manner at this moment. In the end, his entire body was like a furnace yet not a furnace, like an abyss yet not an abyss, and he revealed a boundlessly vast and boundlessly powerful aura. The various laws of the great Tao transformed into various unbelievable phenomena that were reflected in the world like tidewater. Especially the abyssal sword cauldron, it emitted clear cries like a tide, and it seemed to have become a part of Lin Sun's body. It accompanied Lin Sun as he controlled his divine energy and fought fiercely in the world. When looked at from afar, he actually crushed and disintegrated the layer upon layer of sword qi, and he forcefully moved against the violent torrent of energy to approach Gu Yongqiang. Chapter 26-24. On the battlefield of gods, it was as if chaos had been reopened. The entire space was torn apart and turned into the center of the storm. Countless spatial fragments swept up. Lin tore apart the void and rushed to Gu Yongqiang while bearing the sword qi. The scene of his peerless courage and slaughter shocked many people to the point that their eyeballs almost fell out. Gu Yongqiang's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't panic. He raised his sword to block. Clang! The abyssal sword cauldron blasted down. Gu Yongqiang's ancient sword, which was suffused with a trace of immortal aura, couldn't bear Lin's attack. It suddenly buzzed violently, and the sword qi splashed like rain. On the other hand, Gu Yongqiang's figure shook when he suffered such an impact, and he was actually shaken to the point of taking a few steps back in midair. His aged face turned green, and a wisp of seriousness couldn't help but surge between his brows. This kid's cultivation was so strong. On the Taoist sanctum, everyone was stunned at the same time and couldn't believe it. Even a dignified sword ancestor was shaken. It almost made people suspect that they were dreaming. That's it. Gu Yongqiang shook his head slightly, and his eyes surged with a trace of pity. I forgot to tell you that what I displayed just now was just the power of an ordinary emperor ancestor. Now it's the real power of a sword ancestor. After he finished speaking, a wave that was several times stronger than before suddenly surged out from his body. He stood there out of thin air, like a heavenly pillar that supported the heaven and earth. The entire space on the battlefield of gods, with Gu Yongqiang as the center, suddenly collapsed and turned into a huge vortex of sword qi. He stood in the center of the vortex like a god. But this was not the end. Gu Yongqiang gently stretched out his hand, and the violently buzzed ancient sword returned to silence. Then, mysterious scrolls emerged from his sword. There was a domineering blow that could kill gods and demons, a stunning flash that penetrated the sun, the moon, and the galaxy, a destructive scene of sword qi that was like a long river that destroyed a large world, and I've stepped into the ancestor realm for 36,000 years, and my cultivation is immersed in the way of killing. In order to refine this sword, I used the immortal matter as a whetstone, and after thousands of years of polishing, its sharpness has accumulated. Today, I'll let you experience the real power of a sword ancestor. Buzz. Gu Yongqiang gently flicked his finger. The ancient sword was originally only a foot long, but now it was 3 feet long. The Tao diagrams on the sword body also fused into a complete sword diagram. 9 streaks of monstrous sword qi transformed into 9 colored streaks of light that flickered within the sword diagram. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, thunder, yin and yang. 9 different great Tao ancestor realm sword intents circled around the sword picture, accompanied by the ancient sword's impassioned hum. In the end, the ancient sword and the sword diagram transformed into an illusory 3,000-meter-long sword intent that was grasped by Gu Yongxiang. The terrifying sword intent shot into the sky. Before the sword chi arrived, the sword had already arrived. The void was suddenly torn apart by the sword intent, and a spatial rift that was thousands of feet long rapidly extended in front of Gu Yongxiang. Everyone felt as if they were witnessing a strange scene. A huge chasm split open in the heavens and earth, and countless sharp sword chi flowed out. Before Gu Yongxiang even drew his sword, he had already split open the space. The defensive prohibition power covering the battlefield of gods roared violently, as if it was touched by this terrifying sword power. At this time, Gu Yongxiang was like the legendary sword god, releasing a majestic sword chi all over his body. The ancient sword clanged. The sword chi pierced through the 9 heavens and 10 earths. When Gu Yongxiang really slashed out with his sword, everyone finally understood how terrifying the power of the sword ancestor was. With this slash, the battlefield of gods seemed to have turned into a cage. Lin Sun's whole body and the space of thousands of feet around him were frozen. Controlling space, Gu Yongxiang's sword was actually the ultimate manifestation of the profound meaning of space. In the past, Gu Yongxiang became an ancestor with the Tao of space, which also caused a sensation in the 7th heaven. It was precisely with the sword intent of space that many of his peers were defeated by this sword. In the Taoist field, an old man couldn't help but sigh. In the 7th heaven, Gu Yongxiang's sword of space simply amazed this world, and many immortal figures regarded him as a hero of the Great Way. If he could embark on the path of immortality one day, his achievements were bound to be even more dazzling. Even those who didn't know Gu Yongxiang's past couldn't help but tremble when they saw this scene at this moment. How could Lin Sun block this sword? Under the gaze of countless people, the big abyss in front of Lin Sun was broken layer by layer under this sword, almost like a clay chicken or pottery dog. The illusory sword chi of space hadn't arrived yet, but the terrifying sword intent had already rushed to Lin Sun. Lin Sun suddenly smiled, which made everyone puzzled. It turns out that you have hidden your strength. Just in time, I have also hidden my strength, Lin Sun said indifferently. Then, the power around Lin Sun rose at an incredible speed, boiling, and a more terrifying power than before suddenly emerged from his body. If Lin Sun could be said to be an invincible overlord in the peak of the 8th realm, with the power to compete with the Emperor ancestor, then at this moment, the strength he revealed had completely exceeded the limits of this cultivation realm, and it had arrived at an inconceivable state. His entire body seemed to have transformed into an abyss cauldron, and his cultivation seemed to have merged into one, causing the abyssal sword cauldron to rumble and seethe while shining brilliantly with his figure. This was his true battle prowess, and it was also at this moment that he fully displayed all of his skills. Boom! The void suddenly cracked, and the space that was imprisoned like a cage, at this time in front of Lin Sun, at this time, exploded, turning into countless space fragments. Then, the extremely terrifying space sword intent, as soon as it hit Lin Sun's body, made a harsh explosion, as if it had hit an iron plate. Lin Sun's body was like a black hole of a universe, turning into a halo, crushing and devouring all the impact. Finally, under everyone's horrified gaze, Lin Sun struck horizontally with the abyssal sword cauldron, easily smashing the illusory space sword light, exploding into a rain of light, splashing to the 9 heavens. How was this possible? The spectators were not the only ones shocked. Even Gu Yongxiang was shocked, and his expression changed drastically. This sword attack was the perfect manifestation of his power after he became a Tao progenitor, but at that moment, it did not even manage to injure a single hair on Lin Sun's body. This was simply inconceivable. The terrifying power Lin Sun controlled at that moment did not seem like something a peak 8th level Great Emperor could possess. It was something that had never been seen or heard of in the eternal true world. So what if I can't use my trump card? Over the years, I have personally killed more than one Emperor progenitor. Do you really think that I relied on external power to reach where I am today? I might as well be frank with you. In the eternal true world, the natural chasm of progenitors might not be able to be broken. But if I want to, I can crush it with one foot. Lin Sun walked through the air. His entire body was enveloped by the terrifying abyss, and he walked towards Gu Yongqiang. No matter how crazed Gu Yongqiang was, and how he slashed out waves of space sword intent, sword auras that filled the sky shone brilliantly and locked down all the dimensions. But they were like shackles and cages that could not withstand a single blow. They were crushed by Lin Sun with each step he took, and when they landed on his body, they were all blocked by the abyssal sword cauldron. All the spectators turned pale with shock. What power was this? How could it appear on a peak 8th level Great Emperor? At that instant, their inherent knowledge and deeply rooted beliefs were completely overturned. It was simply unimaginable. How could the natural chasm of progenitors be crossed and broken? Gu Yongqiang was also unable to remain calm. His expression was unprecedentedly solemn, and there was a faint hint of rage in it. He used all his power to derive his Tao, and his sword wills intersected with each other to form a shocking spatial sword Tao. The overlapping dimensions were like layers of blooming petals, but also like layers of worlds of sword auras that came crashing down with the force of an avalanche. Each strike could easily kill those great emperors, and it was unimaginably terrifying. But all these attacks were destroyed by Lin Sun. If I didn't want to see just how great you, the sword progenitor from the 7th heaven, are, you wouldn't have been able to live until now. Lin Sun's eyes were cold, and his manner was calm. In the past, when he was at the 7th level of the Emperor realm, he was able to fight against Hung Tianxua. At that time, it was just a battle, but he couldn't really kill Hung Tianxua. But in the past 18 years, his Tao had been completely different. Not only did he step into the 8th level of the Emperor realm, but he also had the foundation to suppress and kill the Emperor ancestors in a head-on battle. The natural chasm and the barrier were no longer obstacles for him. It's impossible. Even the top 10 Emperor ancestors of the 7th heaven didn't have such power when they were at the 8th level of the Emperor realm. A trace of panic flashed in Gu Yongqiang's eyes. His face was livid, and he couldn't even speak. Swish! To everyone's surprise, at this moment, Gu Yongqiang wanted to retreat. But Lin Sun's lips were curved in a mocking smile. The next moment, the 5 Tao forms rushed out and surrounded Gu Yongqiang from all directions, blocking all his retreat. Boom! The 5 Tao forms rushed together like a raging sea. Gu Yongqiang's figure was completely submerged by various Taoism and divine light. This sudden scene was beyond everyone's expectation again, and shocked shouts sounded one after another. Gu Yongqiang roared again and again, like a crazy ancient beast. When his figure finally broke out of the encirclement, he was already bathed in blood. His body was broken, and he was in a miserable state. At this moment, Lin Sun appeared out of thin air, and the Yuan Tao sword, which had been waiting for a long time, stabbed out at an incredible speed. Puff! This sword transcended the space, and almost pierced the place between Gu Yongqiang's eyebrows as soon as he broke out of the encirclement. Gu Yongqiang was stunned. His eyebrows were directly penetrated, and then his head exploded. Then his whole body, soul, and the terrible power in his body all exploded under this sword, turning into a cloud of blood mist and dissipating between heaven and earth. Lin Sun took a step forward and killed the Emperor ancestor with one sword. It was done casually, without a trace of smoke and fire, as if he was taking something out of his pocket. Before Gu Yongqiang died, he didn't even have time to scream. He was completely erased from the world by the vast sword intent. It was too fast. This bloody scene, like a thunder from the 9th heaven, suddenly exploded in the world, enough to make all living beings in the world tremble. At this moment, there was silence in the world. Those onlookers were all stunned. Chapter 26-25. The problem with Nan Yongxiang's surname has been corrected. Thank you for your corrections. The progenitor of one sword, Nan Yongxiang, was dead. All the spectators could not believe it. Regardless of whether it was the nobles from the eternal world or the powerful people from the vast thousand worlds, they were all shocked. The might of the sword Dao that Nan Yongxiang had displayed was so powerful and terrifying that it could make anyone below the progenitor realm feel despair. But he had been killed by Lin Sun with a single strike. Did this not mean that Lin Sun's strength had already reached a level where he could suppress the progenitor realm? This thought instantly appeared in the minds of the crowd. Many people were shocked by their own thoughts. The progenitor of one Dao was like a natural chasm. Since ancient times, almost no one had been able to shake him, much less surpass him and kill him. Even the peerless great emperors in the eternal world who were known as peerless geniuses might not be able to do this. But Lin Sun had done it. He had broken a natural chasm that had existed since ancient times and created a legendary record. Even if he had died now, this record alone was enough for his name to go down in history and become a legend that would be respected by future generations. At that moment, the members of the Nan clan looked as if they had lost their parents. They could not accept all of this. Nan Tianba was dead. Nan Tianzheng was also dead. Now, even the strongest progenitor of their camp, Nan Yongxiang, had died. What else could they use to fight against Lin Sun? An indescribable feeling of grief, anger, and despair spread in the hearts of the members of the Nan clan. Their faces were ashen and their bodies trembled. The entire place was silent. Lin Sun sorted out the spoils of war and held the ancient sword that Nan Yongxiang had left behind in his hand. He could not help but say regretfully, "This sword is extraordinary, but it's self-destructed because of its master's death." What a pity. Even though he said that, he raised his hand and threw the sword into the abyssal sword cauldron. The sword had indeed been destroyed, but it contained wisps of immortal substance. It could also be used as nourishment for the abyssal sword cauldron. Everyone's expressions flickered. When they looked at Lin Sun, their gazes were filled with deep wariness and surprise. At first, when they saw Lin Sun appear in the ruins of the gods, they were in disbelief. They thought that Lin Sun was simply too daring. He was willing to risk his life for a fortuitous encounter. It was no different from courting death. But now, they finally understood that everyone was wrong. Lin Sun was not so bold as to act recklessly, but he was fearless. His cultivation was enough to suppress an emperor ancestor. So what was there to be afraid of? In front of the central immortal palace, there were all sorts of rules and restrictions. At the very least, there was no need to worry about being besieged in this arena battle. There was also no need to worry about the enemy using their trump cards, because none of this would ever happen. And in the case of one-on-one combat, who would dare to claim that they could defeat Lin Sun? The more they thought about it, the heavier their hearts became. For them, Lin Sun, who had won 3 games in a row, had become a natural moat, blocking their way and making them afraid. The atmosphere was deathly still, terrifyingly quiet. As time passed, no one stepped forward to challenge him. Obviously, they were all frightened by Lin Sun's combat power. If no one challenges me within 15 minutes, then I'll be considered to have successfully defended the ring, and I can directly enter the second stage. On the battlefield of the gods, Lin Sun had his hands behind his back as he spoke indifferently, and his gaze swept the clansmen of the Nan clan incessantly. However, even though the expressions of these clansmen were filled with resentment and hatred, none of them dared to look Lin Sun in the eye. On the other hand, the other cultivators present here had various expressions as well, and they glanced at each other. No one was willing to challenge Lin Sun at this moment. Even some emperor ancestors chose to wait and see for now. 15 minutes were almost up, but Lin Sun, who was on the battlefield of the gods, suddenly walked toward the golden pathway. In an instant, the 3 immortal energy certificates he'd obtained during his 3 consecutive victories left his body and vanished from the battlefield of the gods. Why did this fellow admit defeat? Everyone was stunned, and they almost thought they were seeing things. However, Lin Sun grinned and said, "In any case, we have 7 days of time. If any of you want to ascend to the battlefield of the gods and defend the ring, feel free to do so. As for me, I'll wait for a while." Wait? Everyone seemed to have vaguely understood, and many even gasped while they looked at the clansmen of the Nan clan with pity in their eyes. Lin Sun's actions obviously showed that he didn't intend to let off a single member of the Nan clan. Indeed, the members of the Nan clan didn't have the courage to fight Lin Sun again, but as long as they dared to ascend to the battlefield of the gods and abandon Lin Sun, who was defending the arena, they were bound to challenge him at the first possible moment and start slaughter. The duration of the arena defense battle was only 7 days. Even if the members of the Nan clan could restrain themselves from fighting, once the 7 days were up, how would they have the chance to enter the second stage? This also meant that they had no fate with the fortune of the Central Immortal Court. This was why Lin Sun chose to stay. "Lin Sun, you're going too far." Those clansmen of the Nan clan had obviously recovered from their shock. All of them were infuriated to the point their eyes almost split apart, and they were unable to restrain their rage. They wished for nothing more than to skin Lin Sun alive. Lin Sun said with a smile, "Sorry, I just want to bully you. I want you to either die or be eliminated. If I can kill all of you, it will be better." Everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Although the members of the Nan family are in a difficult situation at the moment, they are still one of the 4 major families of the Seventh Heaven. By doing so, Lin Sun obviously didn't take the threat of Nan seriously at all. "Fellow Taoist Lin, then shall we ascend the arena?" Someone couldn't help but speak out and ask probingly. "Everyone, please do as you please. I naturally won't make things difficult for those that have no enmity with me," said Lin Sun casually. This caused many people to heave a sigh of relief in their hearts. But there were also some whose expressions were unsightly because they'd taken pleasure in Lin Sun's misfortune, and it was even to the extent that they intended to watch Lin Sun make a fool of himself. They were very unsure if Lin Sun had taken this as an act of hostility. No matter what, after those cultivators that weren't hostile to Lin Sun obtained Lin Sun's guarantee, all of them fought to start the arena defense battle. The battle was extremely intense, and it was even to the extent that bloody conflicts erupted and casualties appeared. Lin Sun didn't care about this, and he just stood there and watched in a carefree manner. Along with the passage of time, the expressions of those clansmen of the Nan clan gradually became unsightly. How could they be unable to discern that Lin Sun was determined to deal with them? In next to no time, 1 day passed, 2 days passed. During this period of time, there were ceaselessly people that obtained 9 successive victories. In the end, they obtained a message talisman, and then they were carried away by the restrictions that covered the battlefield of the gods and vanished. But even more people suffered crushing defeats, and there were even some that were killed on the battlefield. When he witnessed all of this, Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh with emotion in his heart. Perhaps the ruins of the gods didn't contain any extremely dangerous tribulations, but merely the arena defense battle was sufficient to cause numerous casualties amongst the cultivators that participated in the competition. This was just one of the sites, and similar situations were bound to occur ceaselessly in the other 48 sites. Actually, Lin Sun had noticed as well. Even though there were many cultivators that participated in the competition, ancestors of the Tao were extremely few in number after all. Peak 8th level Imperial Emperors could be considered as heavyweight existences, and their numbers were very few as well. The true main force was those 7th level peak Imperial Emperors and a group of extremely senior 9th level ancestral ancestors. If he wasn't targeted by the Nan clan, then with Lin Sun's combat strength, it wouldn't be difficult for him to succeed in defending the arena defense battle. Of course, this arena defense battle could be said to be dangerous and brutal to the others. Up until 6 days later, under Lin Sun's attention, there were only 50-plus cultivators amongst the almost 700 cultivators that obtained 9 successive victories in the end, and they smoothly left the battlefield of the gods and entered the second test. This elimination rate was undoubtedly shockingly high. Lin Sun calculated for a moment. If every site had 70 people that rose above the rest during these 7 days of competition, then the number of cultivators that were eliminated would be 10 times this number. Up until the 7th day arrived. Amongst the 7 stars that flickered in the sky above the battlefield of the gods, only one remained bright, and the other 6 were dim and lusterless. But Lin Sun didn't make a move, and he kept waiting. He'd already observed that it took a total of 24 hours for a star to dim from bright to dim, or in other words, a day. If those clansmen of the Nan clan still didn't make a move, then he would make a move during the last 2 hours. In this way, so long as they persisted for 15 minutes in the battlefield of the gods, they would be able to advance directly. At that time, even if those clansmen of the Nan clan ascended the battlefield of the gods, they probably wouldn't have much time left. After all, once 7 days passed, the battle of the gods would come to an end. Time flowed by bit by bit. These 7 days of time were simply like extraordinary torture to those clansmen of the Nan clan, and it caused their mental states to suffer boundless torture. There were many times when they wished for nothing more than a charge into the battlefield of the gods, and they wanted to fight Lin Sun even if they died. But in the end, they didn't dare do that, because if they did that, then it would really be no different than giving their lives away. When they saw the curtains to the 7 days were about to be drawn, those clansmen of the Nan clan couldn't help but feel despair, and they felt oppressed as if they were about to collapse. Right at this moment, Lin Sun made a move. After a cultivator that obtained 9 successive victories left, he directly ascended the battlefield of the gods. In an instant, the surroundings were deathly silent. All the experts sighed helplessly, and they abandoned their thoughts of charging forward at the last moment. It couldn't be helped. With Lin Sun obstructing their path, charging forward would be no different than giving their lives away. Lin Sun, the eternal figures of my clan, are holding down the fort outside the ruins of the gods. Even if you're able to walk out alive in the end, you'll definitely die. At this last moment, a clansman of the Nan clan couldn't restrain the depression and rage in his heart any longer, and he roared resentfully. Many people's gazes changed subtly. To Lin Sun, this was indeed a serious and fatal threat. If I can come in alive, then I can leave alive. But you guys, you've completely lost the face of your Nan clan. Lin Sun laughed to himself. This matter was bound to be unable to be kept a secret, and it would definitely spread out. At that time, the entire eternal world would probably know how distressed and pathetic the clansmen of the Nan clan were. Soon 15 minutes passed. Lin Sun, who was unchallenged, directly obtained a message talisman, and he was enveloped by the restrictive power of the battlefield of the gods and disappeared. As they watched him leave, all the experts let out a long sigh. There was only 1 star left in the sky, and it also completely dimmed. The first stage of the battle of the arena came to an end just like that. P.S. The Goldfish Man is in Luoyang. If there's no second update at around 9 p.m., don't wait. He'll make it up when you get home. Chapter 26:26. Lin Sun's figure appeared on an immortal platform. The surroundings were boundless, filled with mist that was as white as the rosy clouds. It wasn't long before a strand of immortal tune resounded out. A beautiful and brilliant scroll seemed to have surged into appearance from within the mist, and it unfolded while countless obscure and mysterious auras of inheritance surged out from it. Origin Dao Canon. Lin was shocked. Was the rumor true? Before entering the gods' ruins, he'd heard that in the last era's heaven's chosen battle, those who obtained 9 consecutive victories in the arena would receive a reward. The reward for this round came from the Central Immortal Court's Origin Dao Canon. According to rumor, this was the general outline of the inheritances of the immortal world, and it converged the 3,000 supreme and formidable Dao art inheritances of the immortal world from the ancient times until now. It was said to be the source of all the techniques in the immortal world. In the last era, the Central Immortal Court was the supreme existence that controlled the myriad of worlds, and the Taoist scripture of origins that was compiled by them was viewed as the #1 scripture in the entire immortal world. But this was just a rumor after all. Lin Sun didn't expect that the last era had been destroyed for so many years, but the origin Tao book still existed. Lin Sun took a deep breath and calmed his mind. The 9 essences immortal control magic can open up 9 great immortal essences, and the Tao can contain 9 palaces. It can manifest the wonders of yin and yang, the pure and turbid. When cultivated to the pinnacle, one can form a 9-fold immortal root, allowing the cultivator to wield 9-fold Tao power. The Heavenly Divination Book of Stars is capable of controlling the energy of the stars in the universe and refining the stars into a quintessence book. It's also called the Book of Stars, and it's capable of suppressing a universe. The Chaotic World Immortal Demon Sutra is like an immortal, yet not an immortal, like a devil, yet not a devil. It fuses the immortal chi and refines the body of a devil. Once you use it, you will be able to wield the power of chaos, trample the heavens and earth, and defy all laws and principles. Tao of World Monarchs. All kinds of supreme inheritances belonging to immortals surged into Lin Sun's heart like a tide. Hundreds and thousands of them flickered constantly. At this moment, Lin Sun realized that as long as he made a choice and occupied one of the inherited powers with his spiritual awareness, the reward would be over. However, this was a difficult decision to make. It wasn't that the supreme inheritances of the last era weren't powerful enough. On the contrary, each of them had extremely unique and wonderful effects, so Lin Sun didn't know what to choose. After a moment of silence, his eyes gradually became clear and calm. With my current cultivation, I don't lack any inheritance at all. Even if I don't have this reward, it won't affect my cultivation at all. So what do I need the most right now? Lin Sun's state of mind became as calm as snow. He was no longer affected by the temptations of all kinds of inheritance and began to examine his own path. After a long time, he made a decision. It was as if he'd seen through a form of karma and allowed his mind to transcend the cage. Along with a flash of his divine sense, it descended onto the scroll formed from the Genesis Tao scripture. His state of mind had no desires, so he decided to leave it to fate. But at this moment, a strange buzzing sound emerged, and a jade archive as white as snow appeared in front of Lin Sun. Immediately afterwards, all sorts of profound and unfathomable immortal Tao laws spread out, circulating with a magnificent rain of light. This was like a fatal temptation. Lin Sun didn't need to make a choice at all, nor did the jade disc of fate take the initiative to attack. The scroll-like Genesis Tao scripture seemed to feel some kind of call and trembled. The next moment, the innumerable power of inheritance in the Genesis Tao scripture turned into rays of light, separated from the scroll, and flew into the arms of the jade disc of fate. Lin Sun was stunned at once, and a look of disbelief appeared on his face. After a long time, he vaguely understood that the jade disc of fate was said to contain the supreme power of the immortal Tao, and it maintained the operation of the rules of the entire 4,900 continents in the immortal world. The Genesis Tao scripture was known as the first supreme Tao scripture in the immortal world, and it included all kinds of immortal Tao inheritances. But if there was no Tao as the source of the inheritance, it was rootless after all, like duckweed floating on the water. Perhaps it could be comprehended and controlled, but it was no longer the orthodox source. For example, if Lin Sun chose one of the inheritances to cultivate, he would only be able to comprehend its mysteries and integrate it into the Tao he controlled for use. As for the immortal Tao that matched this inheritance, it was bound to be impossible for him to control it. But the existence of the jade disc of fate could undoubtedly solve the problem of the core of the entire Genesis Tao scripture, because the jade disc contained the complete power of the Tao, of the immortal Tao. Any inheritance in the Genesis Tao scripture could obtain the corresponding profundity of the Tao from the jade disc of fate. In short, the jade disc of fate was the source of the Tao of origin. Thinking of this, Lin Sun finally understood why the Genesis Tao scripture would so easily throw itself into the arms of the Jade Disc of Fate. Doesn't this mean that the reward for defending the arena this time allows me to obtain the entire Genesis Tao scripture? Lin Sun's eyes became strange. This was really as the saying went, unintentionally planting a willow tree, but it became a shade. Not long after, the Jade Disc of Fate turned into a ray of white light and flashed into Lin Sun's body. Fortunately, this was the last moment before the battle of defending the arena came to an end. The practitioners who had already advanced in these 7 days had already obtained the reward and entered the second level, the Great Hunt. Otherwise, if someone succeeded in defending the arena again, he might not get the reward from the Genesis Tao scripture. Whoosh. Soon, a divine rainbow fell from the sky and fell on Lin Sun, who was standing on the platform. The next moment, his figure disappeared from the platform. Outside the god's relic, many terrifying figures whose cultivation had long surpassed the scope of the ancestor realm had been waiting here for 7 days. When the curtains to the combat arena were drawn, the figures of numerous eliminated cultivators were forcefully teleported out from the rift that led to the outside world. So many people were eliminated. Someone was surprised. There were about 30,000 practitioners who entered the god's relic this time. But now, more than half of them were eliminated. Less than 1 in 10 survived. It seems that the rumor is true. The battle of defending the arena in the last era is really cruel. Someone murmured with a trace of emotion. This is merely the first level. I'm afraid many have died in the battle of defending the arena. In contrast, the second level, the Great Hunt, is even more bloody and cruel. Someone frowned. The god's relic was related to the battle of the Chosen One that was held every 100,000 years by the Central Immortal Court in the last era. According to the rumor, the battle of the Chosen One was the cruelest selection battle of the last era. What? Suddenly, a mighty figure bathed in a myriad of rays of Taoist light spoke angrily. This was a middle-aged man with a graceful temperament and a fluttering willow beard. His whole body was surrounded by strands of immortal laws, and his power was like the sky. Nan Faidu, an immortal existence of the Nan clan. At this moment, all the clansmen of the Nan clan lowered their heads and kept quiet out of fear. Their expressions were full of depression and bitterness. Earlier, they had told him everything that had happened in the battle of defending the arena, and they didn't dare to conceal anything. When Nan Faidu heard this bad news, it was like a bolt from the blue. The deaths of Nan Yongxiang, Nan Tianzheng, and Nan Tianba made him sad, and the fact that the entire Nan clan had been eliminated made him completely furious. Lin Sun had actually ruined the operation of the Nan clan to obtain the supreme treasure. The most humiliating thing was that the Nan clan had lost all their face in the battle of defending the arena, and this news was bound to be impossible to conceal. As expected, a burst of discussion arose in the nearby area, and all of it was related to the elimination of all the cultivators of the Nan clan by Lin Sun alone. Nan Faidu's face turned ashen as he could no longer hold it in. Brother Faidu, don't be angry because of this. No matter how fierce Lin Sun is, he will definitely die this time. In the distance, a woman in a golden robe with a snow-white flying sword floating between her fingers spoke. Her figure was extremely tall and curvaceous. Her black hair was coiled into a bun, revealing an extremely gorgeous face. Strands of the eternal law of life emanated from her body, making her seem like a legendary sword goddess. Moreover, she was a peerlessly beautiful sword goddess. Gu Lingjin, an immortal figure of the Gu clan, was also an extremely famous and terrifying existence in the seventh heaven. Nan Faidu's face was gloomy. It was easy to say, but it was not the Gu clan that had lost its face. But he also knew that what had happened couldn't be remedied. He could only continue to wait until everything was over, and then he would have the opportunity to kill Lin Sun. Of course, the premise was that Lin Sun didn't die in the battle of the Chosen One. The second level, the Great Hunt, will take place in the Great Void Immortal Realm. Those who have successfully defended the arena will carry out a different kind of hunting. Everyone is a hunter, and everyone is a prey. A gray-robed old man riding on the back of a green grasshopper approached, The great hunt will last for 3 days. Only those who survive will have the opportunity to enter the third level, the Ascendant. In this kind of battle, Lin Sun may not be able to survive. The old man looked like an immortal, holding a lavender jade ruler with a leisurely manner. The green grasshopper he sat on shook its head, looking quiet and docile. Li Shangjuan, an immortal figure of the Li clan. This boy is only at the peak of the 8th level of the Emperor realm, but he can kill an Emperor ancestor with his own combat power. How can a great hunt hurt his life? Then Fida's face was gloomy. You don't have to comfort me. There is no doubt that this little guy's combat power is heaven-defying and terrifying. But I have to remind you, you have to be prepared. Mine clan has fallen, those in your clans. If they encounter any danger, before he could finish his words, the beautiful Gu Lingjin and the sage-like Li Shangjuan could not help but frown. This old thing, his own clan had suffered heavy losses, yet he dared to say such harsh words to them. Everyone, don't let others laugh at us. Don't forget that the purpose of our trip is not just for the opportunity here. In my opinion, no matter how many accidents happen, as long as we capture Lin Sun, all the losses, all the efforts will be worth it. Suddenly, a gray-haired, skinny figure of a young man walked over, stepping on a blood-stained scabbard, with a fierce and terrifying aura. Yun Jiawei, an immortal figure of the Yun clan. A terrifying figure, whether it was cultivation or prestige, above Nin Faidu, Gu Lingjin, or Li Shangjuan. P.S. Goldfish just got home and is very tired, but she will not stop updating today. The second chapter is a little late. Chapter 26-27. Yun Jiawei's words made everyone silent. The supreme treasure in the relics of the gods might be tempting, but the reason why these immortal figures appeared here was not just for this. In the final analysis, they had only one goal, Lin Sun, the successor of Mountain of Mind and Heart, who won the chance of nirvana, of freedom. As long as they could capture him, everything else was secondary. Taishu Immortal Realm. In the depths of a vast mountain range that rose and fell like a coiling dragon, the immortal mist lingered and the field was empty. Strong immortal spirit pervaded the air between heaven and earth, but there were no living creatures or spiritual herbs between the mountains and rivers. It gave people the feeling of a dead world relic. Clang! An extremely ear-piercing sound of collision suddenly broke the silence of this mountain range. After that, boundless divine radiance charged out and shot into the sky, causing numerous mountains in the vicinity to rumble as they collapsed and transformed into powder. Moreover, space was like a shattered canvas that was torn apart by the violent fluctuations of the battle. Clatter, a handful of blood rain splashed, which was shocking. Lin Sun raised his sword and cut a burly and majestic man in black armor into 2 halves. The overbearing torrent of sword chi completely drowned the man's spirit that had just escaped and crushed it in an instant. With a long breath, Lin Sun waved his sleeve and put away the spoils left by the man. Then he turned into a stream of light and disappeared in this vast mountain range. The third one. Lin Sun turned his hand, and a talisman condensed by immortal light emerged. On the surface of the talisman, there were 3 bloody marks, bright red like burning. This meant that the burly man killed by him just now was his 3rd battle achievement. At this time, it was the 12th hour since Lin Sun entered the Tai Immortal Realm for the Great Hunt. He had begun to familiarize himself with the rules of the Great Hunt. Here, everyone was a hunter and everyone was a prey. It depended on who could survive in the end and who would become the prey of others. This was the Great Hunt. It lasted for 3 days. The more prey hunted, the higher the battle achievement. At the end of the 2nd level, the higher the battle achievement, the richer the reward. According to Lin Sun's understanding, in the Battle of the Chosen One in the last era, the Great Hunt was the bloodiest and cruelest. All the figures that were capable of entering the Grand Unity Immortal Realm were ferocious fellows that had experienced the battles to defend the arena and obtained 9 successive victories. Every single one of them possessed terrifying cultivation, and they were vigilant and experienced. No matter if it was their disposition, will, combat technique, or experience, they far surpassed the masses and were extremely terrifying. Among the 3 opponents that Lin Sun had killed before, 2 of them were at the peak 8 stage, and 1 of them was the ancestor of One Dao. All of them were extremely powerful and peerless figures. In the vast thousand battle domain, they were all top characters. The most frightening thing was that in the grand immortal realm, one was allowed to borrow external forces. This also meant that the more trump cards each character who participated in the hunt had, the more dangerous and fatal it would be. When Lin Sun killed the second opponent, he was caught unprepared by his opponent's trump card, which caused him a lot of injuries. If he hadn't stopped the power of his opponent's trump card in the first place with the forbidden death magic, he might have been seriously injured and killed. The Great Hunt only lasts for 3 days. Once I am injured, even if it is only a minor injury, if I can't recover in a short time, it will be fatal. Lin Sun was very clear that even if it was the ancestor of One Dao, once he was injured, it would affect his combat power. Once he was targeted by the opponent, he was doomed to be doomed eternally. If I can avoid fighting recklessly, it is naturally the safest way. Lin Sun realized that if he wanted to survive in these 3 days, he had to keep a low profile. He was not afraid of killing, but he had to be afraid of the trump cards in the hands of the enemy. It was even to the extent that he didn't doubt at all that any figure capable of slaughtering their way in the Grand Hunt would definitely possess some heaven-defying trump cards. For example, in the previous battle, Lin Sun had collected 6 kinds of trump cards that contained taboo power from Nan Yongxiang, Nan Tianzheng, and Nan Tianba. 3 of them were secret treasures that contained the power of immortal will. Once they were displayed, even if they couldn't compare with the real immortal figures, their lethality was enough to seriously threaten the life of the ancestor of One Dao. Similarly, they would also pose a serious threat to Lin Sun. Unfortunately, the power of immortal will contained in these 3 secret treasures was left by an immortal figure of the Nan clan. It needed the power of the bloodline of the Nan clan to control it. Outsiders couldn't use it at all, but the other 3 treasures aroused Lin Sun's interest. A sky-shifting seal was a sharp weapon for escape. Once it was displayed, even if one was trapped in a heavy siege, he could instantly teleport thousands of miles away. Through Lin Sun's senses, this sky-shifting seal contained wisps of the aura of space order, which was extremely magical. The other 2 items were a jade talisman and a rusty blade. The jade talisman was branded with the totem of the myriad transformation spear. Its aura was obscure and frightening. As long as it was crushed, one could release a killing move belonging to the myriad transformation spear. Although it couldn't compare with the power of the real myriad transformation spear, if it was suddenly displayed, it could also pose a fatal threat to One Tao ancestor. The rusty blade glowed with a faintly discernible immortal aura. Obviously, it was a fragment of an immortal Tao weapon. According to Lin Sun's estimation, if this treasure and the jade talisman branded with the totem of the myriad transformation spear were fully activated, the power would only be stronger. It could be imagined that if the trump card was allowed to be used in the arena battle, Lin Sun would have to pay a price even if he wanted to kill Nan Yongxiang and the others. However, Lin Sun also knew that in the Great Hunt, no one would use the trump card without authorization unless it was a matter of life and death. Because this kind of trump card could almost only be used once, and the number of each person's hands was extremely limited. Using it once was equivalent to losing a life-saving trump card. Once it was used up, there would be nothing to rely on anymore. Of course, Lin Sun didn't lack trump cards. For example, he still had 3 wisps of the extinguishing fire of order. In addition, he still had the supernatural power of forbidden death, the 5 Tao bodies, and so on. While flying in the void, Lin Sun suddenly noticed that several extremely obscure and hidden aura fluctuations emerged in the distance. If he hadn't used the third eye, he would hardly have sensed it with his divine awareness. There were enemies hiding ahead, and there were more than one. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and immediately turned away. It had only been 6 hours since he entered the great void immortal realm, but he had met many opponents along the way. Almost all of them came in groups. Obviously, they were practitioners from the same force. In such a situation, Lin Sun often just left. It was not dangerous to be besieged, but once a fight broke out, more and more opponents would be attracted by the fluctuations of the battle if he couldn't get rid of his opponent in a short time. This was the reason why Lin Sun was afraid. For example, the group of hidden opponents he found at this moment was obviously from the same force. Lin Sun seems to have found us in advance. As soon as Lin Sun left, the black-robed man hiding in the dark couldn't help but frown and say, "Elder, shall we chase him?" Beside him sat a graceful and charming, beautiful woman wearing a light gauze. Her face was as delicate and lustrous as a young girl. Her skin was as smooth as cream, and her eyes were like autumn water. Her every move was full of charm. In particular, the towering and plump chest was half covered, revealing a large area of snow white, trembling and shining with attractive luster. She was born to be charming and beautiful. It was Gu Banzwang, the emperor ancestor of the Gu clan. I have fixed my eyes on his breath. No matter where he escapes, I can find him as soon as possible. Gu Banzwang gently tucked her hair behind her ear. Her casual movement had a natural charm to it, causing the nearby Gu clan members to feel a rush of heat in their hearts. They hurriedly lowered their heads and cried for their lives in their hearts. The Tao that Gu Banzwang sought was related to the art of charm. The higher the cultivation, the stronger the power of charm. In the seventh heaven, there was once an emperor ancestor of the Buddha clan who was known to have a heart as hard as iron and a body as solid as a rock. However, after meeting Gu Banzwang, he was so fascinated that he almost lost his mind. It was conceivable how amazing Gu Banzwang's charm was. "You little bastards, I have restrained my cultivation, but your state of mind is still so impetuous. You really lack tempering." Gu Banzwang glanced at the clansmen of the Gu clan. Immediately, her expression changed, and she said, "A few days ago, some strong people who had fought with Lin Sun in the arena battle spread the news that Lin Sun's combat power is incomparable. In a place like the battlefield of the gods, he could kill Nin Yongxiang by relying on his own combat power. Although I am confident that I can deal with this boy, it is better to be safe than sorry. Since we want to deal with him, we can't just mobilize the power of our Gu clan." When she spoke up to hear, she lightly bit her moist and alluring red lips while her starry eyes glowed, and she said, "So I've decided to ask the Yun clan and Li clan to act with us. What do all of you think? Isn't this making a mountain out of a molehill? Even if Lin Sun's combat strength is incomparably heaven-defying, we have many trump cards in our possession that are sufficient to annihilate an emperor ancestor. So why would we be afraid of Lin Sun?" Someone hesitated. Gu Banzwang laughed with ridicule, while the pair of snow-white and plump breasts on her chest surged, and it shook the hearts of those clansmen to the point they almost flew out of their chests and hurriedly moved their gazes away. "We have a trump card, but doesn't Lin Sun have one? Don't forget that he's the inheritor of Fong Siyuan and was capable of traversing all the way to the 49 barriers of the immortal realm. How could he be so easy to deal with? The Nan clan has already fallen, and I don't want our Gu clan to follow the same path." As she finished speaking, a wisp of a solemn expression suffused the space between Gu Banzwang's brows. All the information and facts proved that they absolutely couldn't be careless when dealing with Lin Sun, nor could they underestimate the strength Lin Sun possessed in the slightest. Otherwise, the painful lesson of the Nan clan was a lesson to be learned from. At this point, those clansmen of the Gu clan didn't voice any more objections. On the other hand, Gu Banzwang took action at the first possible moment. Her fair and slender fingers lightly clenched together, and then she crushed a communication talisman used to send messages. Swoosh! A ray of light condensed from the glow of the grand Tao suddenly shot into the sky, and then it exploded like fireworks. It transformed into numerous rays of light that vanished in all directions. P.S. I'll start making up for the last chapter tomorrow. Chapter 26-28. The Tai immortal realm was so vast that it was no different from a large world. After the first battle, There are less than 1/10 of the practitioners who entered the Tai immortal realm from the 49 battlefield of gods. There were only about 2,000 people. Perhaps the number was not spectacular, but these were all existences who had won 9 consecutive victories on the battlefield of gods. All of them could be called giants and overlords on the road to the Emperor realm. Some existences in the Emperor Ancestor realm were as transcendent as gods. It could be said that among these 2,000 practitioners, the lowest cultivation was at the peak of the 7th level of the Emperor realm. Of course, being able to win 9 consecutive victories with the cultivation of the peak of the 7th level of the Emperor realm meant that their combat power was bound to be incomparably heaven-defying and abnormal. Therefore, in this great hunt, not only Lin Sun became extremely vigilant and cautious, but also those arrogant and domineering characters in the outside world became low-key and tolerant. This undoubtedly made the atmosphere of the entire Tai immortal realm more oppressive and dangerous. At this time, after releasing the messaging talisman, Gu Banzwang and the others only waited for less than a quarter of an hour. Under the distant sky, dazzling and blazing escape lights appeared one after another. These escape lights moved through the void at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, they had already arrived at the mountain area where Gu Banzwang and the others were hiding. Then, 2 groups of figures appeared. They were the experts from the Li clan and the Yun clan. There were more than 30 people gathered together. If Gu Banzwang and the others were included, the number alone had reached nearly 50. In the Tai immortal realm, it was definitely a terrible lineup that could make any strong practitioner flee. It's just a deal with Lin Sun. Do you need us 3 emperor clans to act together? A man in black, who was the leader of the Li clan, said. He stood straight like a spear, his face was like a jade crown, and his eyes were like the beginning of chaos, flowing with clear and turbid air, which was extremely terrifying. On his back was a huge axe that was 2 meters long. It was completely black, and its blade was dazzling and bright. Li Henshui, the emperor ancestor of the Li clan. In terms of combat power, he was above Nin Yongxiang and Gu Banzwang. Gu Banzwang pursed her lips and smiled. Her eyes were charming, and her fair body exuded a fatal charm. Brother Henshui, Nin Yongxiang and others have all been killed. You are powerful and don't be afraid of Lin Sun, but I am afraid of him. I have no choice but to ask you and Brother Luohong for help. Her sweet voice drifted through the air like a devilish tune that plucked at the heartstrings, and it caused the auras of those cultivators that had just arrived here to roil, while their vital blood heated up and their mouths went dry. This woman was simply a source of calamity. Only one person remained unmoved. That was Yun Luohong, who Gu Banzwang had addressed as Brother Luohong. He was the leader of the Yun clan, and was also an emperor ancestor. His clothes were whiter than snow. His figure was imposing and robust. His eyes were icy cold, and his entire body was coiled with a sharp aura that caused one's heart to tremble. He was like a divine sword that pierced through the sky and looked down proudly upon the 9 heavens. Where is he? Yin Luohong didn't waste his breath and asked directly. His voice was sonorous like the howl of a sword, and it seemed capable of tearing apart one's eardrums and mind. Don't you want to discuss countermeasures? Gu Banzwang blinked her watery eyes. Our 3 great clans combined are enough to sweep through the entire Tai immortal realm. What strategy do we need? Just crush them. Li Henshui, who carried a giant axe and was dressed in black, said with a smile. His words were full of confidence and disdain. Although Yun Luohong didn't speak, his expression was cold and indifferent, without any fluctuation. Obviously, he didn't object to Li Henshui's suggestion. Gu Banzwang thought for a moment, then revealed a smile that could captivate all living things, and said, Then, I'll listen to you. Come with me. As she spoke, she led the way. Watching her charming, slender, and graceful figure go away, many people's throats and eyes went dry, and they secretly swallowed their saliva. It was just a figure, but it was full of charm that made one's imagination run wild. The lineup of Gu Banzwang, Li Henshui, and Yun Luohong was mighty and extremely shocking, and it couldn't be concealed at all. Not long after they started moving, they alarmed some cultivators along the way and attracted their attention. The forces of 3 of the 4 clans of the East Emperor have gathered together. Are they going to deal with Lin Sun? Some people hid far away, their hearts trembling. They're definitely going to deal with Lin Sun. Only such a peerless and ruthless person can make the 3 great immortal emperor clans mobilize such a large force. If they were dealing with an ordinary person, there would be no need to do so. It seems that the crushing defeat of the Nan clan has sounded the alarm, and the 3 great immortal emperor clans don't dare to be negligent. Speaking of which, that Lin Sun is really terrifying. He's just one person, but he killed the Nan clan on the battlefield of the gods until they could only lower their heads. All sorts of voices sounded, but no one dared to stay. After sensing the movements of the 3 great immortal emperor clans, they immediately retreated far away, not daring to get close for fear of being implicated. It should be known that this was the Tai immortal realm, and everyone was prey. If they were killed by the 3 great immortal emperor clans, then their deaths would be too worthless. And as these cultivators left, they also spread the news, like a storm that swept through the Tai immortal realm. Along with the crushing defeat of the Nan clan, Lin Sun's strength had long been deeply rooted in everyone's hearts. Everyone knew that he was an extremely dangerous opponent and could not be judged by common sense. And the power of the 3 great immortal emperor clans, the Li clan, the Yun clan, and the Gu clan, was also not to be trifled with. If they joined forces, they could sweep through the Tai immortal realm and make people flee at the mere sight of them. Now, between Lin Sun and the 3 great immortal emperor clans, a killing calamity would erupt, and it would be difficult not to attract attention. In the Tai immortal realm, every cultivator's movements were not fixed. In other words, if one wanted to survive in the Tai immortal realm, almost no one dared to stay in one place for too long. Because no matter how powerful the concealment method was, it would still be detected by opponents who had mastered mysterious techniques. At that time, it would be obviously too late to leave. Lin Sun was no exception. Previously, after sensing that Gu Banzwang and the others were hiding, he immediately left. His figure flickered, and he restrained his aura, moving stealthily between the boundless mountains and rivers. Not only was he avoiding some possible killing calamity, but he was also searching for prey. Soon, Lin Sun suddenly stopped in the void, and his eyes looked towards the waist of a steep mountain several thousand zhang away. There was a waterfall, a spring, and an old pine tree, but there was no one there. But in Lin Sun's eyes, he saw a figure standing on the old pine tree. When Lin Sun looked over, the figure also raised his head and looked at him from afar. Then he smiled and said, "Brother Lin, we meet again." This person was dressed in white, and his black hair fluttered in the wind. He had a wild bearing, and there was a 7-inch golden coffin floating above his head. It was Tsang Fuxing. He was a peerless, ruthless person who had been on the wanted list for 18,000 years before Lin Sun entered the vast Thousand Battle domain. He stood under the pine tree with his hands behind his back, and his body was filled with an oppressive loneliness. His arrogance was filled with a domineering air. "You want to fight?" Lin Sun asked. Tsang Fuxing shook his head and said, "If you want to fight, then there's no need to talk nonsense. I just want to remind Brother Lin that a killing calamity has come for you. It's said that the experts of the Li clan, Yun clan, and Gu clan have joined forces and are looking for your traces in this Tai celestial realm." Lin Sun raised his eyebrows, and he couldn't understand what Tsang Fuxing meant. Tsang Fuxing sighed and said, "I just can't bear for someone like you to die in this god's relic. I only hope that you can survive this killing calamity. Goodbye." After saying that, he turned around and left. It seemed that he really just came to remind Lin Sun. Lin Sun thought for a while and said, "Thank you." Tsang Fuxing waved his hand without turning his head and said, "In this Tai celestial realm, there's no lack of people more terrifying than the 4 Eastern Imperial clans. Brother Lin, you need to be careful." After saying that, his figure had already disappeared into the horizon. people more terrifying than the four Eastern imperial clans. Lin Sun's black eyes slightly narrowed. There was a huge number of cultivators participating in the god's relic this time. Before Lin Sun came, he only remembered those forces that were hostile to him. Apart from that, he really didn't know how many powerful characters were participating in the god's ruins and who they were. At this moment, Zhang Fuxing's reminder also made Lin Sun start to face this problem seriously. One should know that Zhang Fuxing was once a ruthless character ranked first on the wanted list. After arriving at Chaotian City, his name was even left on the domain Battle Steel. To be able to get such a peerless figure to remind him, one could imagine that there were definitely some terrifying opponents in the Tai immortal realm that he had overlooked. However, Lin Sun was not in the mood to think about it now. He was thinking about the killing tribulation that Zhang Fuxing mentioned. The Li clan, the Gu clan, and the Yun clan had joined hands. Looks like the miserable defeat of the Nan clan has already caused them to arouse vigilance, and they've taken me to be a great enemy. Then let's see who lives and who dies. A cold light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes. In the next moment, green wood and red fire Taoist bodies flew out together and headed in the same direction. Lin Sun's original body flew in another direction. Just 10 minutes later, a group of figures turned into divine rainbows and appeared at the place where Lin Sun originally stood. The one in the lead was Gu Banzwang. She glanced around with her beautiful eyes and suddenly frowned. The situation is not right. The aura of this kid has gone in two directions. It seems that he has already noticed that something is wrong. It's very likely that he has displayed a doppelganger. Can you determine which direction is the direction that his original body is fleeing to? Li Hinshui's eyes flashed and asked quickly. If this kid is using a doppelganger, then the aura and the original body's aura are the same. It's impossible to determine the difference. Gu Banzwang was extremely confident in her tracking skills, but under such circumstances, she couldn't help but feel that it was a little tricky. Then let's act separately, Yun Luohong, who had always been silent, said. Perhaps this is what he wants to see. If we act separately, it's tantamount to being divided by him. Even if we catch up with his original body, the threat to him will be reduced by half. A haze appeared between Gu Banzwang's eyebrows. She had expected that Lin Sun would not be easy to deal with, but she didn't expect that just tracking and dealing with him would cause such a tricky situation. Library of Literature. Chapter 26-29. Gu Banzwang's words made the atmosphere a lot more gloomy. No one thought that Lin Sun was so cunning. But at the same time, after using a doppelganger, the power of his body will be weakened a lot, and it will be easier to kill him. Li Hinshui pondered. Let's do it this way. I will take people to act with Banzwang and others, and Brother Luohong will take people in another direction. Yun Luohong didn't express his opinion, but Gu Banzwang objected. It's better for me to act with Brother Luohong. You don't trust me? Li Hinshui's face was a little gloomy. Gu Banzwang smiled sweetly and said in a gentle voice, I think Brother Hinshui's strength is enough to deal with all kinds of situations. On the contrary, Brother Luohong and I can guarantee that nothing will go wrong. As she said, she threw a piece of black horn to Li Hinshui and said, This is the life bone of a unicorn. With this treasure, we can sense Lin Sun's breath. Li Hinshui took it in his hand, played with it a little, and snorted coldly. Then let's have a try and see who can kill the little bastard's body. After saying that, he took people and whistled away. Brother Luohong, shall we also act? Gu Banzwang asked charmingly. Yun Luohong glanced at her and said, You really can't distinguish the breath of Lin Sun's body? Gu Banzwang smiled lightly. Although I can't distinguish it, I can roughly infer that the strength of Brother Hinshui is enough to easily kill a doppelganger of Lin Sun, and we can act together and kill his body. In this way, the fortune of this boy will be obtained by us. Yun Luohong said expressionlessly, If you dare to plot against me, I will, Gu Banzwang hurriedly said, I promise that I will not dare to have any other ideas. Yun Luohong nodded, and without any more nonsense, He took the people of Yin clan and directly began to act. Gu Banzwang hurriedly took people to follow, but she laughed in her heart. She didn't tell Yun Luohong that the direction Li Henshui and others were chasing was the direction where Lin Sun's body was most likely to appear. The reason why she did this was very simple. Gu Banzwang was afraid. She had learned a lot about Lin Sun and his achievements, and had long regarded him as an extremely dangerous enemy. Originally, she did intend to unite all the forces to deal with Lin Sun. But when Gu Banzwang sensed Lin Sun's aura fleeing in two different directions, he realized that Lin Sun might have noticed their pursuit. Under such circumstances, it was undoubtedly the safest way to test the combat power of Lin Sun with the help of Li Henshui and others. In short, this was killing with a borrowed knife. As for Lin Sun's fortune, Gu Banzwang didn't care about it at all, because even if they managed to obtain such good fortune, they would still have to hand it over to the Dongwang clan. The four clans of the Dongwang royal clan basically had no chance at all. As for whether she would be blamed by Li Henshui in the future, Gu Banzwang didn't care much about it. She had said at that time that it was impossible to judge which direction Lin Sun's real body fled to. Elder, could it be that you haven't noticed? Gu Banzwang obviously has other plans. As they pursued, a clansman of the Li clan couldn't help but warn them. However, Li Henshui laughed, his eyes flashing. No matter how scheming that bitch is, she definitely wouldn't dare to harm us in this matter. If I'm not wrong, what we're chasing this time is most likely a clone of Lin Sun. Elder, if that's the case, even if we kill Lin Sun's clone of the Great Path, we won't get anything. Wouldn't it be equivalent to wasting our efforts? The clansmen of the Li clan all revealed expressions of indignation. Don't worry, Lin Sun isn't that easy to deal with. In my opinion, Gu Banzwang and the others won't be able to kill Lin Sun in a short period of time. Li Henshui's expression revealed a hint of conceit. But we're different. After we kill Lin Sun's clone, we can go and meet up with Gu Banzwang and the others. If she really dares to take all the battle merits for herself, she'll have to see if our Li clan agrees to it. Everyone immediately relaxed. Buzz, after the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the black beast horn in Li Henshui's hand suddenly produced a strange tremor. He immediately became spirited and waved his hand. Prepare for battle. Instantly, the group of people stopped in the void. This was a boundless mountain range. Immortal mist was like clouds drifting between heaven and earth. As far as the eye could see, it was vast and empty. Relying on the senses of the black horn, Li Henshui immediately looked towards the depths of the mountain range. There was a low mountain there, bare and very inconspicuous. But as an emperor ancestor, Li Henshui sensed an almost imperceptible ripple of restrictive aura at that moment. It was very subtle, almost invisible. If it wasn't for the black beast horn's reminder, even Li Henshui couldn't help but doubt whether he could catch this trace of restriction fluctuation. Everyone be careful. Although this is Lin Sun's clone, it absolutely can't be underestimated. Don't fail miserably in an easy task. Li Henshui reminded them secretly. As he spoke, he silently removed the enormous axe that he carried on his back and held it in his hand while his vital energy circulated to its limit in secret. There were a total of 19 clansmen of the Li clan beside him. All of them were experienced in battle and had experienced blood. There was no need for him to remind them. They had already quietly circulated their qi. Let's go. Li Henshui took the lead and rushed towards the depths of the mountain range. Behind him, a group of clansmen followed closely. When they moved in the void, they were like a group of shadows, not making a single sound. But this scene was all seen by a pair of eyes. Thousands of miles away, in the depths of a large river, a formation plate appeared in Lin Sun's palm. The formation plate reflected a light screen, impressively reflecting the figures of Li Henshui and the others. It seems that I can harvest a batch first. Lin Sun's eyes were deep, and he quietly stood up from the bottom of the river. Originally, after being reminded by Tsang Fuxing and being aware of this killing disaster, he planned to take a roundabout battle. First, he used the method of the great path doppelganger and himself to act separately, so as to achieve the goal of dividing the opponent. In this way, he could greatly weaken the threat from the opponent. And at this moment, what he had set up was a trap. On the peak of the mountain, he had set up a restriction formation and left a trace of his own will in the formation to attract the attention of the enemy. And he was lurking at the bottom of the river thousands of miles away, using the formation plate to communicate with the power of the formation, to observe the traces and number of the opponent. If the opponent's number was large, he would retreat at the first instance. If the opponent's formation was not much of a threat, then this trap would become a true killing disaster, giving the enemy a fatal blow. Obviously, in Lin Sun's view, although Li Henshui and the others were a threat, they were not very serious. So, he decided to pull in the net. Until they were thousands of feet away from the low mountain peak, Li Henshui and the others quietly stopped, fanning out, and sealed off all directions. When I give the order, attack this mountain with all your strength. Do you hear me? Li Henshui transmitted, a murderous spirit surging in his eyes. At this moment, he was actually a little nervous, a little excited, and a little expectant. Although the opponent was very likely only a great path doppelganger. But after all, it was one with Lin Sun, and this Lin Sun was a peerless and ruthless person, causing the Nan clan to suffer a great loss. The nearby clansmen of the Li clan nodded and gathered their strength as they waited. Do it! Taking a deep breath, Li Henshui suddenly waved the huge axe in his hand. Bang! An axe light that seemed to be on the verge of splitting the heavens flashed up, and it was over 3 kilometers long. It tore through the sky and carried the vast and powerful energy of azure lightning as it struck towards the low mountain peak. This axe hadn't even descended when the sounds of gods chanting scriptures and ghosts howling resounded out from space, and it was obvious how terrifying this strike was. At the same time, the other 10+ Li clan clansmen had already made a move in unison. Bang! This expanse of the heavens and the earth was in chaos, and it fell into a great torrent of destruction. Various blazing and resplendent Dao arts were mixed with the monstrous might of numerous emperor weapons, and it was like a heavenly river that had burst its banks as it charged out from all directions. When looked at from afar, this expanse of the heavens and the earth was illuminated. The might of such a full-force strike was utterly indescribable. The mountain instantly melted and transformed into boundless ash that dispersed into the surroundings, and everything in the world fell into destruction as if they'd been fiercely wiped out by the hand of the heavens. Bang! The rumbling that shook the heavens and the earth instantly resounded in the 9 heavens and swept towards the surroundings, and the torrent of energy that was like a landslide and a tsunami swept out, and it seemed as if it intended to flatten the boundless mountains and rivers. After a long time, the surging dust and dirt that covered the heavens and the earth gradually dispersed. Not to mention a clone, even a Dao ancestor would be instantly annihilated by such an attack. It's utterly impossible to resist. A wisp of an arc arose on the corners of Li Henshui's mouth. But in the next moment, this arc froze on the corners of his mouth. In his divine sense, the short mountain that was covered in the energy of restrictions had really been obliterated, and even a bottomless chasm had been blasted open on the ground. However, there wasn't a trace of Lin Sun's figure within it. Even if he died, there ought to be some traces left behind. Yet now, the expanse of the heavens and the earth that had been destroyed was completely empty. Elder, Lin Sun's Dao clone doesn't seem to be here at all. The other clansmen of the Li clan recovered from their shock, and their expressions changed indeterminately. But this black beast horn is clearly pointing towards this place. Li Henshui frowned as he flipped open his palm to reveal the black horn that Gu Banzwang gave him. Right at this instant, wham! The black horn droned violently, as if it had suffered an irritation. Subsequently, a shrill cry resounded. The figure of a clansman of a Li clan that stood nearby suddenly exploded, and his flesh and blood splattered as he perished in both body and soul. This was an extremely experienced Ninth Realm ancestor at the Perfection Realm, and he was able to obtain 9 consecutive victories in the arena. From this, it could be seen how strong his cultivation was, and it was far from what an ordinary peak Great Emperor could compare to. However, he was caught off guard and died on the spot. This sudden scene caused Li Henshui and the others to feel a chill run down their spines, and their scalps almost exploded. All of them realized that the situation wasn't good. But before they could react, another unexpected change occurred in the battlefield. P.S. There will be more updates at night. Chapter 2630. Li Hengxi. Zhu Xie was an 8th-level martial emperor. His cultivation was extremely profound, comparable to Nan Tianzhong. His combat power was extremely strong. When he sensed that something was wrong, he activated his cultivation and instinctively activated all his cultivation to defend. However, right at this instant, a fist smashed down like a divine mountain descending from the heavens, and his cultivation and defensive treasures actually instantly shattered like paper. When Li Hengxi wanted to dodge, it was too late. He could only watch as the fist came crashing down. Bang! His head, neck, chest were all in a straight line, and they were crushed by this punch as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The terrifying force of the punch even evaporated the rain of blood that sprayed out. Li Qingbi. Like Li Hengxi, Zhu Xie was an Emperor Zhu Xie. However, her cultivation had reached the perfection of the 8th-level martial emperor realm. She was seen as a pearl of the Li clan. She was highly valued by the elders of the clan. They thought that, with her cultivation, she had a high chance of becoming the Zhu Xie emperor ancestor. When the change happened, she instinctively dodged without hesitation based on her sense of danger. However, countless strands of dense sword qi suddenly surged into appearance from all directions, and they seemed to cover the heavens and the earth as they completely drowned her peerlessly graceful and slender figure. Boom! Amidst the thunderous roar of sword qi, Li Qingbi was sliced into pieces by the countless sword qi, as though she had suffered the cruelest death by 1,000 cuts in the world. Not even her bones were left. Li Yutong, a 9th-level martial ancestor who was only one step away from mastering a complete Great Tao. He wore a mysterious emperor puppet. His defensive power was shocking. However, in an instant, he was smashed into pieces by a cauldron. The emperor puppet exploded, and even his soul dissipated at the same time. Other than that, there were 3 other Li clan members who died. They were either killed by the sword qi, smashed into pieces by the palm, or swept away by the fist force. All of this happened at almost the same time. It was too fast. Almost as soon as Li Henshui and the others sensed that something was wrong, this sudden killing calamity erupted. It was terrifying to an unimaginable extent. Li Hengshui's reaction was not slow. However, he did not expect that such a monstrous killing calamity would suddenly erupt against a clone. All of a sudden, he was caught unprepared. Only then did he see clearly that the great path doppelganger that he had expected to belong to Lin Sun was not just one. There were 4 of them. Moreover, one of the sword cauldrons floating above his head was obviously not a doppelganger, but Lin himself. Damn it, I've been tricked. Li Henshui's face darkened, and his eyes almost popped out. He let out a roar and rushed towards Lin Sun like a furious ancient beast. Boom! He brandished the giant axe in his hand, stirring up tens of thousands of Tao Radiance natural laws. It was as if the heavens were being split open. The terrifying Emperor Ancestor might made this world tremble, the void rumble and collapse. Clang! Lin Sun resisted with Abyssal Sword Cauldron, which made Li Henshui stagger. Li Henshui's face changed again. He finally understood why someone as powerful as Nan Yongxiang was killed by Lin Sun in the battle of defending the arena. This kid's combat strength has really reached a level where he can shake and suppress an imperial ancestor. It's too heaven-defying. Oh, dash! No! At this instant, 2 more screams resounded from afar. 2 more clansmen of the Li clan had been blasted to death, and they died on the battlefield. In fact, the battlefield was already in chaos at this moment. Those clansmen of the Li clan had suffered such a bloody and terrifying attack. Although they reacted extremely quickly, they could not withstand Lin Sun's violent suppression. It should be known that every doppelganger of his was reconstructed by the Great Path Furnace scripture, and the power they possessed now was not inferior to that of his original body. At the beginning, when Lin Sun's original body and these doppelgangers attacked, he had already urged his combat strength to the extreme without holding back at all. How could that kind of power be ordinary? At this moment, only a moment had passed. 9 clansmen of the Li clan had died, and it should be known that there were originally 19 clansmen of the Li clan. In other words, in just a moment, nearly half of the Li clan had died. This bloody scene was like the haze of death covering the battlefield, and it was constantly reaping lives. It stimulated the remaining clansmen of the Li clan to roar repeatedly, as if they had gone mad. The scene was extremely chaotic. Some tried to stay far away and escape from the situation of being ceaselessly suppressed, yet their attempts ended in failure repeatedly. Lin Sun's 3 doppelgangers were like a formation of 3. The might they emanated completely enveloped the clansmen of the Li clan, and it was utterly impossible for them to turn the situation around in a short period of time. Someone didn't hesitate to activate his trump card, causing a strand of terrifying will that belonged to an eternal figure to appear, and it pressed down upon this expanse of the heavens and the earth to the point of showing signs of collapse. However, before this will could exert its might, it was torn apart by a blade that was mottled with rust, and it transformed into a rain of light that covered the sky before shattering. This blade came from the Nan clan, and it was originally an eternal Tao weapon. Even though it was severely damaged, it could still be considered as a secret treasure with great lethality. However, at the same time, the blade collapsed along with it. In the end, it was a heavily damaged treasure, and the energy it contained was limited. A wisp of madness flashed in the eyes of Li Henshui, who was in battle with Lin Sun's original body when he witnessed this scene. Between Li Henshui's palms and fingers, an extremely dazzling golden light suddenly surged out. Upon a closer look, it was a wooden statue that was less than half a foot tall, and it sat upright on the auspicious cloud. The statue sat cross-legged with an ancient face that seemed to be smiling and crying, and its hands that were clasped at its abdomen formed a strange ancient seal. The endless, dazzling golden light surged out from this statue, and it revealed a brilliant and boundless aura of immortality, causing this expanse of heaven and earth to be enveloped in a solemn and mysterious atmosphere. Lin Sun and his 3 doppelgangers who were in battle with the enemy all stiffened, and they felt a fatal danger. Undoubtedly, the statue that Li Henshui summoned at this moment was an extremely terrifying trump card, and it was filled with taboo power. At this moment, the clansmen of the Li clan all breathed a sigh of relief at the same time, and their eyes glowed with a trace of fanaticism, as if they had absolute confidence in the statue. As Li Henshui recited a strange and obscure incantation, his strength was actually madly absorbed by the statue in his hand. The blazing light of immortality that emerged around the statue became more and more brilliant, and the aura it released became more and more terrible. It was faintly visible that the closed eyes of the statue seemed to be about to open. Boom! Without any delay, Lin Sun activated the abyssal sword cauldron, trying to stop all this. But with a deafening roar, the abyssal sword cauldron was shaken back by the golden light of immortality released by the statue, and could not get close to it at all. Little bastard, you can die in peace under the immortal golden body left by the ancestor of our clan. Li Henshui looked crazy. His aura surged, and all his strength was absorbed by the statue called Immortal Golden Body, like a great river. Lin Sun waved his hand and threw out a jade talisman. In an instant, a phantom of a spear surrounded by immortality roared out. What was imprinted in it was the aura of the myriad transformation spear. Like the previous rusty blade, this was also a trump card of the Nan clan, and it was displayed by Lin Sun at this time. However, with a rumble, the phantom of the spear was blocked by the blazing golden light, and then it exploded inch by inch and dissipated into thin air. Lin Sun's pupil shrank. This attack, which was a serious threat to the ancestor of the emperor, was still unable to shake the statue of the immortal golden body. Ha, it's useless. No matter how much you struggle, it's futile. Li Henshui laughed wildly. The other clansmen of the Li clan sneered as well. This statue was actually the remains of an immortal realm ancestor of their clan. It was said to be indestructible and possessed unbelievably terrifying power. Ordinary trump cards could not shake it at all. Boom! Suddenly, the statue seemed to have accumulated enough power, and it suddenly released a golden light of immortality that shot into the sky, sweeping through the heavens and the earth. The closed eyes of the statue trembled slightly, and then it slowly opened. An indescribably terrifying power spread out, oppressing the sky to the point that it trembled, and everything showed signs of collapse. The scene caused all the clansmen of the Li clan to tremble, and their minds surged. It was as if they were witnessing the awakening of their ancestor after countless years, and he had returned to the world. At this moment, Lin Sun suddenly smiled and said, "This treasure belongs to me, Lin Sun, from today onwards." His voice was still drifting through the air. At this moment, time seemed to have frozen, and the heavens and the earth fell into a momentary silence. This was naturally the forbidden divine ability. At this moment, Lin Sun appeared in front of Li Henshui and slapped his palm down. Bang! Li Henshui, whose strength had already been absorbed by the statue, was smashed into pieces like a piece of paper. At the same time, the abyssal sword cauldron descended, suppressing the divine statue within it. Its half-opened eyes were once again shut at this moment. Everything happened in an instant. When the clansmen of the Li clan reacted, they saw the scene of Li Henshui's body exploding into pieces, and they saw the scene of the statue being taken by Lin Sun with the abyssal sword cauldron. No! All of them cried out involuntarily, as if they were struck by lightning. Their expressions changed wildly, as if they were grieving for the death of their parents, and they were about to go crazy. This change was too great, and it was like a dream. In the blink of an eye, everything had been reversed. The scene of the immortal golden body easily killing Lin Sun was also destroyed, and it would never happen again. At the same time, Lin Sun felt completely relieved, and his body was completely relaxed. The aura released by the statue was like a sharp blade against his throat, and he felt a fatal threat. There was no doubt that if the statue's power was completely released, it could easily kill Lin Sun in an instant. Fortunately, all of this was stopped by the forbidden divine ability, and it didn't really happen. There was no delay. Lin Sun activated the abyssal sword cauldron and attacked the clansmen of the Li clan. But the three doppelgangers were faster than him. While the clansmen of the Li clan were shocked, they seized the opportunity to attack with all their strength. This time, Lin Sun didn't intend to let any of the clansmen of the Li clan go. P.S. Here's a patch. Chapter 2631. Blood splashed everywhere. Screams shook the sky. The mountains and rivers that had already collapsed in the battle were showing a scene of death like purgatory. Boom! Lin Sun and the three Tao bodies fought wildly. All kinds of power overlapped and covered the sky, showing a momentum of crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Before long, Li clansmen were killed in the battlefield. Some were killed by the sword rain. Some were smashed by the abyssal sword cauldron. Some were incinerated by the terrible Taoism. In the process, some people used their trump cards, but they were either avoided by Lin Sun in time or resolved by Lin Sun's own trump cards. In fact, Lin Sun had confirmed in the battle that the abyssal sword cauldron, which had refined and absorbed many immortal substances over the years, could completely resist some so-called trump cards. For example, the immortal willpower imprinted in the Jade Talisman and the secret treasures containing the power of order could be resisted by the abyssal sword cauldron. In other words, the abyssal sword cauldron, which had been nourished by the power of order and absorbed many immortal substances over the years, had become extremely magical and was no longer an ordinary emperor weapon. Therefore, after Li Henshui's death, the battle was completely one-sided. At this time, only 3 Li clansmen were struggling to hold on. Crack! The thick cyan shield cracked and exploded. An opponent at the peak of the 8th level of the Emperor realm was directly smashed by Lin Sun's fist. Under the terrible fist force, the opponent's whole body exploded. Let's go! The remaining 2 people rushed madly, trying to kill their way out of the encirclement. Suddenly, Lin Sun's 3 Tau bodies swarmed up and launched a fatal attack on one of them. Boom! As the divine radiance swept out, that person's soul was directly blown away and scattered. Lin Sun was just about to deal with the last opponent, but he suddenly noticed something. He stopped and frowned. The next moment, he decisively abandoned the fleeing opponent, and together with the 3 Tau bodies, he collected the spoils on the battlefield, turned around, and left. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. In the battlefield that showed signs of destruction, the lastly clansman couldn't help but be surprised. His expression kept changing, as if he couldn't believe that Lin Sun would let him go so easily. After that, his gaze swept the battlefield, and he was completely stunned as he gazed at the mountains and rivers that had been destroyed like ruins. His mind had completely collapsed. He was the only one left. The clansmen by his side had already turned into ashes and vanished from this world. Indescribable anger, fear, grief, and despair drowned him like a tide. When Gu Banzwang and Yun Luohong rushed over with their clansmen, they saw such a scene. The expressions of Gu Banzwang and the others changed while their pupils dilated. How could they not understand that a bloody and cruel battle had erupted here before they arrived here? As for Li Henshui and the others, it was extremely likely that they had already died. What about Li Henshui and the others? Gu Banzwang took a deep breath and asked, and he seemed to still be in disbelief. Dead, they're all dead. The lonely clan member seemed as if he was possessed. He sat paralyzed on the ruins of the mountains and rivers, and he seemed to have lost his soul. Gu Banzwang and the others looked at each other, and their hearts were filled with great shock. There was a total of 19 people in Li Henshui's group, and every single one of them possessed a combat strength that an ordinary figure couldn't compare to. Yet now, only a single person remained. It was Lin Sun. Gu Banzwang couldn't help but ask, who else could it be besides him? The Li clan member's entire body trembled, and he seemed to have recalled a terrifying and bloody scene, causing him to howl sorrowfully like a wild beast. It's all of you. It's all of your fault. We agreed that we were only going to kill a clone, but all of this was fake. It was fake. His voice shook the heavens and the earth, and the dense despair and rage within it caused the expressions of Gu Banzwang and the others to change indeterminately. How could I have imagined that even Li Henshui wasn't a match for him? Gu Banzwang sighed lightly, while her charming and delicate face became much gloomier. According to her knowledge, Li Henshui possessed a trump card that was like a taboo, and it was a divine statue refined from the eternal gold body that possessed boundlessly terrifying might. But it was under such circumstances that Li Henshui had died. This was undoubtedly a grievous news, and it caused Gu Banzwang's mood to become even heavier. Besides his heaven-defying battle prowess, this lad must possess an extremely troublesome trump card. Otherwise, Li Henshui wouldn't have suffered such a crushing defeat. Yin Luong spoke, his expression as indifferent as before, but his eyes had already been replaced by a solemn look. Show us what you saw using a secret technique. Gu Banzwang looked at the Li clan member. She was eager to know how Lin Sun had killed Li Henshui and the others. The Li clan member roared hoarsely. So what if I show you? Can you kill Lin Sun? Can you? Being questioned in such a manner, Gu Banzwang and the others felt a little embarrassed. In the battle to defend the arena, the Nan clan had suffered a crushing defeat. And now, the Li clan had been killed to the point where only one person was left. All of this was enough to prove how dangerous and terrifying Lin Sun was. Under such circumstances, could the Gu clan and Yun clan really suppress Lin Sun with their strength alone? Everyone couldn't help but be shaken. Haha, you can't either. In the great void, immortal realm, no one can kill Lin Sun, no one. The Li clan member stood up and staggered away like a madman. As he walked further and further away, his sorrowful voice reverberated endlessly between heaven and earth. "Brother Luohong, what should we do?" Gu Banzwang looked at Yun Luohong with her beautiful eyes. Yun Luohong fell into a rare silence. Previously, he had led people and Gu Banzwang to chase after Lin Sun in another direction, but in the end, they had failed. Until just now, when they suddenly received Li Henshui's jade talisman for help, they rushed over without hesitation. But it was clear that they were a step too late. "This lad is too dangerous. If we continue to chase, I'm afraid there will be more and more casualties." After a long time, Yin Luohong spoke in a low voice, a gloomy expression on his face. For a Tao ancestor from the seventh heaven to say such words was no different from admitting his inferiority. The Gu clan and Yun clan members all felt their chests tighten and their moods sank. That Lin Sun was really impossible to defeat. This made them feel very uncomfortable. "It's good to give up." Gu Banzwang looked as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She stretched out her hand and patted her towering, snow-white breasts. "In any case, there's still some immortals standing guard outside the ruins of the gods. If Lin Sun really leaves this place alive, it will definitely be difficult for him to resist the killing intent of those immortals. Isn't it too shameful to admit defeat like this?" Someone couldn't help but ask. Gu Banzwang's beautiful eyes widened. "Shameful? All right, why don't you continue to court death?" That person immediately shut up. "Let's do it like this. This matter ends here." Yin Luohong made a decision. His expression was as cold and indifferent as before, but when he made this decision, an indescribable sense of frustration surged in his heart. He was just a peak 8th stage great emperor from the ancient path of the stars, but he had caused the 4 Eastern Imperial clans to suffer heavy casualties, and they had no choice but to give up on the pursuit. This was indeed too shameful. If this matter spread out, the prestige of the 4 Eastern Imperial clans would suffer a heavy blow, and they were destined to become the laughingstock of the eternal true world. But there was no other way. There was really no other way. When they truly fought against Lin Sun, they realized how terrifying and heaven-defying he was. He was so strong that even the Emperor ancestor's heart palpitated in fear. Lin Sun did not know that the Gu clan and the Yun clan had already given up on the idea of continuing to chase after him. At that moment, he appeared in the depths of a golden desert filled with blue, immortal fog. After instructing Xiao Wu to set up the formation, Lin Sun immediately sat down cross-legged and began to meditate. He swallowed bottles of rare spirit pills and medicines in one go. In the previous battle, he had used up a lot of his energy, and he urgently needed to recover. However, this battle had also given Lin Sun an extremely generous reward. On the message talisman, there were 18 more battle achievements. In total, he had 21 battle achievements. Apart from that, the treasures and cultivation resources that Li Henshui and the others carried also became Lin Sun's spoils of war. Their value was so great that it was impossible to estimate. And the most attractive thing to Lin Sun was undoubtedly the statue, suppressed in the abyssal sword cauldron. Less than half a foot high, it sat cross-legged, and its whole body showed a kind of dark color. The face of the statue was simple and unsophisticated. Its eyes were closed tightly, and its expression seemed to be smiling and crying. Its hands were clasped together on its abdomen, forming a strange handprint, giving people a strange and mysterious atmosphere. Lin Sun now knew that this was a statue made from the remains of an immortal figure. It was well preserved and could be called a real immortal body. It was said that such remains had been soaked and tempered by the immortal power for many years, and could already be called a kind of immortal substance. After all, this was the remains of an immortal figure, and although this statue was only half a foot high, it was equivalent to condensing the power of the immortal golden body to the extreme. For anyone, it could be called a supreme treasure. Even if it was seen by an immortal figure, they would fight madly for it. At the same time, Lin Sun also noticed that in this statue, There was an unimaginably strong willpower. What Li Henshui tried his best to awaken was this willpower. Lin Sun had no doubt that if the immortal statue was awakened at that time, it could absolutely kill him easily, because it was too powerful. It was far beyond Lin Sun's understanding of immortal figures. Unfortunately, such a treasure was not something that Lin Sun could use, because to awaken the willpower, it needed the power of the bloodline of the Li clan, and outsiders could not activate it all. But Lin Sun did not care about this. In his eyes, this immortal statue was a huge treasure made of immortal substance, which could be used as nourishment to refine the abyssal sword cauldron. As for the silent willpower, it would also be refined along with the immortal statue, and then gradually obliterated by the abyssal sword cauldron, and there was no possibility for it to recover. Several hours later, Lin Sun woke up from meditation, and his breath had recovered to the peak of the 8th level of the Emperor Realm. There are less than 2 days left. Lin Sun stood up, and after thinking for a while, he decided to continue. Now, there was only the power of the Gu clan and the Yun clan left, and he intended to take advantage of these 2 days to destroy them in one go. Chapter 2632. Lin Sun's character had always been one of those who didn't offend him. If someone offended him, sorry, no matter who you were or where you came from, a tooth for a tooth, blood for blood. In addition to Gu clan and Yun clan, Lin Sun also had some other enemies in mind, such as Wan, Hung, Luo, Zhu, and other immortal emperor clans. These forces had made a declaration in Chaotian City that as long as Lin Sun dared to appear in the battlefield of gods, they would kill him without mercy. Lin Sun would not be polite to them. Others were not afraid of tickles because they had too many lice, but he was fearless because he had too many enemies. Clang! Lin Sun flicked his finger, and the abyssal sword cauldron rang out. The next moment, he had disappeared in the vast desert. Be careful. There is only a day left. We must not be careless. In a valley, one Baidu reminded. As for the battle record, as long as you can survive, you can enter the 3rd level. He was an extremely senior emperor ancestor in the Wen clan. Beside him, there were several clansmen of the Wen clan who could not help but nod when they heard this. They had been hiding here for a long time. Even if they were discovered, when they saw such a lineup, ordinary people would not dare to act rashly. Elder, I heard that Lin Sun is being chased by the 3 great forces of Gu clan, Yun clan, and Li clan. This time, he will definitely not be able to escape, a man said with a smile, his eyes full of schadenfreude. Suddenly, an indifferent voice rang out in the sky above the valley. In my opinion, you will really not be able to escape this time. The voice was not loud, but it clearly resounded in the ears of Baidu and the others, causing their expressions to change. Looking up, they saw a tall figure standing in the sky above the valley, his black hair fluttering like an immortal. Lin Sun. Baidu and the others were shocked, and they almost could not believe their eyes. Wasn't this guy being chased by the 3 immortal forces? Let's go. Baidu reacted the fastest and immediately sent a message, intending to leave with the people around him. But at this moment, Lin Sun attacked without hesitation. Boom! The abyssal sword cauldron glowed, and millions of rays of light circulated, enveloping the entire canyon. Lin Sun's figure flashed, and the 5 Tao forms and himself teleported in the air to kill Baidu and the others. The whole process took no more than 30 seconds. The battle came to an end. Baidu and all the other clansmen of the Wen clan had been annihilated, and the mountains and rivers in the vicinity of a few thousand kilometers had transformed into withered ruins that seemed like they'd been destroyed. Whoosh! The divine rainbow transformed by Lin Sun flew away. Time flew by. In the remaining time, Lin Sun's figure traversed the vast lands of the Great Void Immortal Realm, patrolling along the way. He was like a soundless shadow, and even if some cultivators noticed him, they would only be able to catch a glimpse of him before vanishing without a trace. However, all along the way, bloody scenes had occurred successively, and cultivators from various powers had perished. For example, the Hung family, Luo family, Zhu family. In contrast, these undying forces that control the Earth Order and occupy the Sixth Heaven are far inferior to the four East Imperial clans in terms of both number and overall strength. The threat that this brought to Lin Sun was also much smaller, and he was not lenient in killing them, nor did he show any mercy. In less than a day, the number of enemies killed by Lin Sun along the way had reached more than 20, and the battle record on the message talisman in his hand had reached 43. This series of actions couldn't be concealed at all. Very quickly, it attracted the attention of countless experts and caused them to tremble. Did the alliance of the three East Imperial clans fail? Only then did many people realize that the situation was not right. Lin Sun had launched an unscrupulous killing spree. Did this mean that the assassination against him had been declared a failure? This guy is too ruthless. Those who have fallen are all from the forces that have enmity with him. Some people were bitterly disappointed. They saw through Lin Sun's intentions and were shocked by Lin Sun's ruthless means of revenge. In the vast, great void, immortal realm, no one can suppress this person. Someone let out a sorrowful cry, and he felt rather uncomfortable in his heart. All those that were able to enter the Grand Hunt were overlord-level existences that looked down upon all before them. But now, none of these overlords could suppress Lin Sun's arrogance. Don't worry, people like us who have no enmity with Lin Sun are safe for the time being. Someone comforted his companions. At the same time, Lin Sun frowned. He had found the traces of the Gu clan and the Yun clan, but found that it was difficult to find a chance to attack. The strength of the two great forces acted together, and with Gu Banzwang and Yun Luohong in charge, they were completely invulnerable. If he took the initiative to fight, Lin Sun was confident that he could inflict heavy casualties on the other side, but at the same time, he was afraid that he would also pay a heavy price. This kind of lose-lose approach was rejected by Lin Sun. After all, this was the Great Void Immortal Realm. If the 3 days of hunting did not end, they could not leave this place. This also meant that once he was injured, if he was intercepted and attacked while escaping, the consequences would be absolutely unimaginable. Lin Sun had deliberately revealed his traces in an attempt to lure the cultivators of the Gu clan and the Yun clan to attack. As long as they caught up, he would do the same, splitting them up and defeating them one by one. Who would have thought that even when he revealed his traces, the two immortal emperor clans only put on a defensive and alert formation and did not intend to take the initiative to attack at all? Obviously, they had already realized the danger and did not intend to give Lin Sun any chance to take advantage of them. This inevitably made Lin Sun feel a little helpless. Just as Lin Sun was hesitating whether to continue chasing, he suddenly turned over his palm, and a crystal-clear jade talisman like a green willow leaf appeared. Immediately after, a clear and melodious voice came from the jade talisman, revealing anxiety and panic. "Brother Lin, please save my uncle. He's dying." The voice was mixed with a trace of choking. This was the voice of Xiang Xiaoyuan. Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly shrank. The green willow leaf jade talisman was given to him by Xiang Xiaoyuan before he entered the god's relic. Yu Duqiu also had one. At this moment, Xiang Xiaoyuan was asking for help. Obviously, her uncle Lu Xianque was in grave danger and could die at any time. Otherwise, with Xiang Xiaoyuan's temperament, she would not be so panicked and anxious. Lu Xianque is the emperor ancestor of the Xiang Lu clan in the Seventh Heaven. His status is so high that he isn't below Nan Yongqiang, Gu Banzwang, Li Henshui, and the others. In the great void, immortal domain, who would dare to attack such an existence? Lin Sun could not help but be surprised. He originally thought that in this world, only a barefooted person like him would dare to deal with the immortal emperor clans in the Seventh Heaven without any scruples. But who would have thought that besides him, there was another strong person who dared to do so? This made Lin Sun infer that the opponent who could force Lu Xianque into such a dangerous situation was definitely not a simple person. This made him immediately think of Song Fuxing's warning. In the great void immortal realm, there was no lack of strong people more terrifying than the 4 Eastern Imperial clans. As he pondered, Lin Sun had already started to move. The green willow leaf jade talisman trembled slightly, emitting waves of power to guide him. This guy actually gave up? Far away, Gu Ban's Wang, Yin Luohong, and the others who had been vigilant all noticed Lin Sun's movements. They could not help but feel surprised. He must be afraid. Someone sneered, full of pride. Idiot! Gu Ban's Wang glared at him. There's so many of us, but we're being held back and threatened by him alone. Do you think someone like him will be afraid? In the future, use your brain when you say such things. That person was instantly embarrassed and did not dare to speak. Yin Luohong said, no matter what, we should still be careful. Until the end of the hunt, we must not split up. Everyone agreed with these words. Lin Sun was too terrifying. So terrifying that if they dared to split up, there would be a disaster. In an expanse of ruined mountains and rivers, Lu Xianxue coughed up blood ceaselessly. His figure was in tatters, and he was on the verge of death. However, he was still fighting, but anyone could discern that he could not hold on for much longer. His opponent was a robust and strong man. His upper body revealed bronze skin, his bald head was shiny, his face was handsome, and his gaze revealed a ferocious aura. On his bright and clean forehead, there was a demonic blood-colored iris flower totem imprinted on it. Along with his attack, dazzling blood-colored lightning surged through the heavens and the earth. It was like countless blood-colored iris flowers were in full bloom and intended to swallow his enemies. His might was ferocious, domineering, and peerlessly fierce. He was clearly only at the peak of the 8th level of perfection, yet he actually suppressed an emperor ancestor like Lu Xianxue all along the way, and he pursued and attacked fiercely. There were 2 men and a woman standing far away from the battlefield. One of them wore a golden dress, had a slender waist, and had a simple and elegant bearing. From the beginning until the end, she didn't even spare a glance at the battle. She held a yellowed scroll in her hand and was reading it calmly. Her eyes were gentle, and she was quiet, as if the battle was far less attractive than the scroll in her hand. At that moment, her eyes were fixed on the scroll, but she said, Qing Fu, that's about enough. After all, that's an old man from Lu Xianxue. You can't bully him too ruthlessly. If you really want to play, once we return to the eternal true world, I'll help you choose a few opponents to play with. When the bald, handsome young man called Qing Fu heard the woman's words, even though he was slightly unwilling, he still obediently withdrew his hand. He grinned disdainfully at Lu Xianxue, who was about to die, and said, You've lived for a long time, but you were beaten up like a dog. If I were you, I would have slit my throat and committed suicide a long time ago. Enough with the nonsense. In terms of age, that old man is of the same generation as your grandfather. Don't be too ruthless, or else if Lu Xianxue gets serious, I'll have to explain things to my family. The long-robed woman was still reading her book. She did not even raise her head, and her words were indifferent. But Qing Fu did not dare to say another word. He touched his bald head and left the battlefield while laughing. At the same time, a man in black clothes beside the long-robed woman cast his gaze towards his feet. With a gentle smile, he said softly, Miss, have your reinforcements not arrived yet? There was a person under his feet. Toward Little Garden. P.S. I'll have more updates tonight. Requesting monthly votes. Chapter 2633. On the ground. Xiang Xiaoyuan's delicate and fair face sunk into the dark brown ground. Her eyes were filled with sorrow, worry, and anger. The large foot stepped on her slender back, and it was filled with an unshakable and domineering force that completely suppressed her. This was a confinement full of great humiliation. He will come, he will... Xiang Xiaoyuan's lips were bleeding, soaking the ground. Her eyes were full of determination. The man in black who was stepping into the garden sighed. His voice was still as gentle as before. We don't have much time to waste. Miss, I'll give you a choice. Either you die, or your uncle dies. You decide. Just kill him directly. Why go through so much trouble? The bald, handsome man, Qing Fu, walked over and looked at Xiang Xiaoyuan, who was trampled on the ground. He couldn't help but reveal a trace of pity. Such a beautiful girl, but she's being trampled on like this. Even my heart aches when I see her. His voice was sarcastic and sarcastic. Xiaoyuan. In the distance, Lu Xianque, who was seriously injured and bathed in blood, rushed over. His eyes were bloodshot, like a beast that lost control due to rage. Grasshopper's eyes flashed fiercely. Old senior, I've already spared your life. Do you still want to die? Before his voice died away, he casually punched. Bang! Lu Xianque was instantly sent flying. His body cracked, and many bones were broken. His injuries were so severe that he couldn't even get up from the ground. Let Xiaoyuan go. I'll accompany you to the end. Lu Xianque hissed. Grasshopper grinned and ignored him. The man in black looked at the woman in a long dress who was holding a scroll and studying it seriously. The latter raised her head helplessly and glanced at the man in black. Why do I always have to make the decision? The man in black smiled warmly and said, Well, I'll send this girl on her way as long as you don't blame me for only bullying women. The woman in a long dress couldn't help smiling. A trace of playfulness appeared on her plain and elegant face. Aren't you worried that Lin Sun will come to avenge this girl? The dark-clothed man thought about it seriously and said, Then what should I do? Could it be that I have to worship this young lady, kneel on the ground, kowtow, and apologize and repent with tears and snot? At the end of his sentence, he couldn't help but laugh. You look like a gentle person, but you have a heart of stone. Even Green Grasshopper is more like a human than you. The woman in the long dress shook her head and looked at the scroll in her hand again. I'll wait for another 7 minutes at most. You can think about how to solve this yourself. The black-robed man nodded. Looking at Xiang Xiaoyuan at his feet, he said in a gentle voice, Miss, don't worry. You still have half an hour to live. How boring. If it was me, I would definitely not waste my time like this. I would just kill him with a single punch. As Qing Fu spoke, she couldn't help but glance at the man behind the woman in the long dress. He was wearing plain cotton clothes and had been silent the whole time. He was very clean from head to toe, and his long hair was neatly combed. However, he wasn't handsome and looked a bit mediocre. Even his breath was almost non-existent. Standing next to the woman in the long dress, it was easy to ignore him. But when Qing Fu looked at him, there was a trace of unconcealable fear in his eyes, as well as a trace of eagerness to fight. But in the end, he resisted the thought of testing the man in the plain clothes. He didn't dare to act rashly. Otherwise, he suspected that he would be killed with a single punch. From beginning to end, the man in the plain clothes didn't even look at him. But Qing Fu didn't care. He knew that in the eyes of the man in the plain clothes, not only him, but also the black-clothed man. The only person that the man in the plain clothes really cared about was the elegant woman in the long dress. Miss, there's only 7 minutes left. If you have any last words, why don't you tell me? Maybe I'll be kind and help you build a monument or something. Qing Fu was bored, so he squatted on the ground and asked with a smile. Then he stretched out his hand to pinch Xiang Xiaoyuan's face. If you don't say anything, I'll tear your tempting little mouth. Whose mouth do you want to tear? A slightly abrupt voice resounded out in this expanse of the heavens and the earth, and it revealed a strand of indifferent coldness that caused one's heart to palpitate. Qing Fu's hand stopped, and he turned around to look. The black-clothed man who stepped on Xiang Xiaoyuan's body raised his brows and smiled warmly. Looks like he really cares about you. Next, let's see if he's able to save you alive, or if both of you die together. As he spoke, he raised his head and looked over as well. On the other hand, the woman in the long dress was still reading, and she seemed to be engrossed in the book. The man in the plain clothes by her side was still silent as before, and his ordinary face was like an iceberg that wouldn't melt for eternity, without the slightest emotion. In the distance, a tall figure appeared out of thin air, and it entered into the eyes of Qing Fu and the black-clothed man, causing them to reveal expressions of interest. Qing Fu's gaze was unbridled. The gaze of the black-clothed man carried a faint smile instead. It was a smile that was cold and indifferent to the extreme, and it was like the joy of waiting for his prey. The person that arrived was precisely Lin's son. He frowned slightly as he looked at Lu Xiangxue, who was heavily injured to the point he was unable to stand up. On the other hand, when he saw Xiang Xiuyun, who was stepped on by the black-clothed man, his eyes narrowed imperceptibly, and a cold light flashed within them. "Brother Lin, don't worry about me. Quickly take my uncle and leave." Xiang Xiuyun spoke anxiously. She knew too well how terrifying these people were. Each of them was more heaven-defying than the other, and they were terrifying to the point of causing others to feel despair. Swoosh! Qing Fu's figure flashed and appeared by Lu Xiangxue's side, and he similarly stepped on Lu Xiangxue while crossing his arms before his chest. His gaze carried an undisguised provocation as he looked at Lin's son and said, "No matter if you've come to give your life away or to save someone, you have to pass through me first." He raised his thumb and pointed at himself with a ferocious gaze, and he was extremely arrogant. The blood-red iris pattern on his forehead was devilish and terrifying. "There's still me." The black-clothed man smiled warmly. "We've all heard of your name and know your origins. But no matter if it's me or Qing Fu, we don't believe that anyone in this world can break through the natural chasm of the ancestor realm while at the peak of the 8th level." Lin's son went silent for a moment before he suddenly smiled lightly and said, "So you've come for me? You can say that." Qing Fu's eyes were ferocious and playful. "How about it? Do you dare to play? As long as you can defeat me, I'll let go of this senior who was beaten like a dog by me." Lu Xiangxue was furious, but he obviously tried his best to suppress it. He tried hard to calm himself down and said in a hoarse voice, "My young friend, you should leave quickly. It's an extremely stupid thing for Xiang Xiuyun to ask for help. You can't get involved in this matter otherwise." Before he finished his words, he let out a muffled groan as his spine was crushed by Qing Fu's foot. "How about it? Do you dare? Give me a straightforward answer." Qing Fu grinned and said. Lin's son also smiled and spat out 2 words from his lips. "Okay." He lifted his foot and took a step. It was a light step without any order. But at this time, the woman in the long skirt who was reading a book suddenly said, "Qing Fu, be careful." Those who were familiar with Lin's son might know what it meant when he made such a decision. Those opponents who had died in Lin's son's hands should know how terrifying Lin's son was at this moment. In an instant, the void in front of Lin's son broke into a straight crack silently, and Lin's son had already appeared in front of Qing Fu like a swift light. Qing Fu was indeed a ferocious person who had experienced killing for a long time. His face slightly changed. He exerted all the strength in his body and punched out an extremely fierce punch, trying to block Lin's son's sudden attack. Lin's son didn't dodge and let the punch hit him. His big hand, like a cage that covered the sky, covered the fist. Bang! Qing Fu's punch hit Lin's son, but it couldn't break Lin's son's defense. Instead, the fierce punch was crushed and obliterated inch by inch. This made Qing Fu realize something was wrong at the first moment. His face changed again, and he was about to change his move. Lin's son's palm had already covered Grasshopper's face. The force of his palm broke Grasshopper's defense like a hot knife cutting through butter. Then, Lin's son grabbed Grasshopper's neck and lifted him into the air. There was no other reason. Compared to killing Qing Fu with one blow, Lin's son was more worried that Qing Fu would counterattack and kill Lu Xiangxue under his feet. Therefore, Lin's son trapped Qing Fu at the first moment. At this time, Lin's son carried Green Grasshopper, who was ferocious and had severely injured Emperor ancestor Lu Xiangxue, as if he was carrying a chick. The terrifying and unparalleled power of suppression was simply shocking and completely beyond the imagination of everyone present. Qing Fu's handsome face turned red and twisted, and his eyes were full of horror. It seemed that he couldn't believe that there was someone in this world who could capture him with one blow. "Little Baldy, how dare you play with me?" Lin's son looked indifferent, and his deep eyes were full of sarcasm. In the distance, the woman in the long dress, holding the yellowed scroll, was stunned. Even she, who was calm and indifferent, showed such an expression at this moment, not to mention the others. The warm smile on the face of the man in black who stepped on Xiang Xin gradually disappeared. At this moment, he revealed the coldness hidden deep in his heart. "My friend, if you don't let go, you will admit your fate." The man in black narrowed his eyes and reminded Lin Sun seriously. "Okay," Lin Sun said with a smile. "I can keep his life first. But since he provoked me and hurt me before, he has to pay the price." Crack, 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 before his voice died away. Ching Fu's bones were shattered inch by the power of Lin Sun's shaking hand, making a dense sound of bones breaking. Ching Fu was paralyzed like a noodle. Suffering such a cruel injury, Ching Fu was really cruel. He gritted his teeth and didn't say a word. Only his fierce eyes were bloodshot, and he stared at Lin Sun with hatred. Bang! Lin Sun didn't even look at him. He threw Ching Fu at his feet like throwing rubbish. Then he looked at the man in black and asked, "Are you sure you want me to go through you?" There was silence, and the atmosphere was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. More updates. Chapter 2634. The black-clothed man's foot was still firmly planted on Xiang Xiaoyuan's body, but his gentle expression had already turned grave. Especially when he was stared at by Lin Sun, the silent disdain and coldness made the dignity of the man in black feel the most direct provocation. The elegant and calm woman in a long dress, holding a yellowish scroll, said, "In my opinion, we'd better take a step back and make peace." The man in black twitched his lips slightly and said with a wry smile, "Miss, can you not shake the morale of the army at this time?" He rubbed his face with both hands and then took a long breath. When he looked at Lin Sun, his eyes had become as sharp as a cold blade, and there was a terrible killing intent surging in his pupils like a whirlpool. The woman in the long dress shook her head helplessly and said no more. She knew that if the man in black didn't pass this hurdle, there would be a problem in his state of mind. The heart of cultivation had always been subtle. This was especially true for those cultivators who were decisive in killing and advancing bravely. It seemed to be a retreat that was meant to appease trouble and keep the peace. But it was very likely to mean fear, which would damage the spirit that had been honed for countless years. In particular, if he gave in before the real fight, he would take it to heart every time he thought of it in the future, which would become a mental obstacle. Therefore, the woman in the long dress didn't persuade him much. It didn't matter if he did as he pleased, or if his heart was as firm as iron and indestructible. Different people's state of mind was different after all. "You have to pass this hurdle," the man in black said, showing a gentle smile like spring breeze to Lin Sun. His momentum had changed. He was as lofty as a mountain and as sharp as a blade. Even a smile like spring breeze couldn't hide his sharpness. Lin Sun looked at him calmly. He just pointed to Xiang Xiaoyuan, who was stepped on by the man in black, and said, "If something happens to her, I promise you won't die easily." It was a very plain sentence, but the meaning in it made the man in black laugh. He said, "Don't worry. I, Shui Chongjing, have never disdained to threaten my opponent with other means in battle since I started my cultivation." His words were filled with arrogance towards his own cultivation. With a flick of his toes, Xiang Xiaoyuan was kicked into the air and flew towards Lin Sun. Lin Sun was about to reach out his hand to catch Xiang Xiaoyuan. At the same time, Shui Zhangjing's figure suddenly disappeared. The next moment, he appeared in front of Lin Sun, clenched his fist, and punched at Lin Sun. Boom! This punch was dazzling and resplendent. It seized all creation and displayed the profundities of the Grand Tao, and various Grand Tao profundities were fused within it. As this punch struck out, it was like the Heaven Tao was pressing down. Lin Sun's expression remained unchanged. He held Xiang Xiaoyuan with his left hand at the first time, and his right hand turned into a circle as if he was holding Tai Chi, but the image of a dark and nameless abyss emerged. An earth-shattering collision sound suddenly resounded. The nearby void rumbled and collapsed. The ground cracked, and mud flew everywhere. Immediately after, the vast mountains and rivers nearby suddenly collapsed. Countless rocks and plants were turned into ashes. Lin Sun took a step back. However, before he could stabilize himself, the dark-clothed man's second punch had already arrived, and it was swift like a thunderclap that shook the nine heavens. Surging laws of the grand Tao poured out like a waterfall within the force of his punch, and it faintly seemed as if the images of the gods had charged out from within the force of his punch with the intention of obliterating the world. This fist was matchless and matchless. Even the woman in the long dress in the distance couldn't help but nod secretly. In the deafening sound of the collision, Lin Sun was shaken to take a step back again. He had fallen into a passive position in the first punch, and the dark-clothed man had seized the initiative. Moreover, he had to protect Xiang Xiaoyuan with his left hand, so he had become much more passive. But even so, when Lin Sun blocked this matchless punch, it still surprised the dark-clothed man a little. In his expectation, even if the power of this punch couldn't kill Lin Sun, it wouldn't be a problem to injure him. However, this situation didn't happen. This made the dark-clothed man more aware of Lin Sun's strength. Without hesitation, he seized the initiative and struck the third punch, the fourth punch, the fifth punch without hesitation. Every punch had the power to shake the sky and destroy mountains and rivers, and it was enough to make those peak 8th-level emperors in the world despair and unable to resist it. Along with the dark-clothed man's continuous attacks, before the might of every single punch was completely dispersed, the next punch would strike down once more. It was like a ceaselessly overlapping ocean wave that piled up layer by layer and pushed up without end, and its might rose without end as well. Under such swift, and terrifying attacks, Lin Sun's figure was ceaselessly shaken and moved back without end. The nearby heavens, earth, mountains, and rivers collapsed and shattered along with this, and it transformed into a terrifying scene of destruction. The peerless force of the punches swept out, and it even gave others the misconception that the heavens and the earth were overturned. When he struck out for the ninth punch, the might that ceaselessly overlapped and rose had already arrived at a world-shocking state, and it caused the nine heavens to be shocked and all things to collapse. Nine-wave, overlapping force. This was the strongest technique possessed by the dark-clothed man. Every single punch from before had been accumulated for the sake of this ninth punch, and it accumulated the strength to erupt in the end. The profundities of the 9 levels of the punch converged together would release an unprecedentedly terrifying and lethal strike. Defeat. Right at this moment, a sharp light flashed in the dark-clothed man's eyes, and he revealed a brilliant and dazzling smile. Bang! The fist force that had been accumulated to the extreme suddenly broke out at this moment. In an instant, it was as if 100,000 volcanoes erupted at the same time, and the power released completely drowned this world. The terrifying torrent raged and swept, and wherever it passed, everything turned into ashes. Nothing seemed to be able to resist the power of this punch. When the light rain was still diffusing and the turbulence was still continuing, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded. "Have you had enough fun?" The bright smile on the face of the dark-clothed man suddenly froze, and his pupils widened. He was shocked uncontrollably in his heart. "It's my turn to attack." That indifferent voice resounded once more, and then a tall figure walked out of thin air amidst the surging and monstrous rain of light. His clothes fluttered with the wind, and he was completely unharmed. Moreover, his entire body was coiled by a circle of light that was like an abyss, and it seemed as if he was impenetrable by all techniques. The dark-clothed man felt a strong fear in his heart. How could this be possible? Retreat. The voice of the woman in the long dress sounded in the distance, but was already a step too late. Lin Sun stepped forward and came to the front of the dark-clothed man in an instant. Like a ray of light, he cut through the ages and flashed in the world at an incredible speed. He waved his hand and punched. It was just an understated palm, without a trace of smoke and fire. But the dark-clothed man used all his potential to fight against Lin Sun, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. Bang! The next moment, like an ant trying to shake a tree, he was thrown away by Lin Sun's palm. His hair was disheveled, and his figure staggered. The void collapsed and exploded. Before he could stand firm, Lin Sun's figure had already arrived. He reached out his hand and grabbed the man's ankle. Like picking up a wooden stake, he smashed the man hard on the ground. Bang! A hole was smashed in the ground, and the ground cracked. In the smoke and dust, the dark-clothed man's face was swollen, and he coughed up blood. He let out a muffled groan, and his eyes flashed fiercely. He tried to break free from Lin Sun's big hand with a secret method. But to his horror, it didn't help at all. The peerless cultivation that he was proud of was completely powerless in front of Lin Sun. The next moment, he was swung up by Lin Sun and smashed down hard. His skin and flesh were torn, and many bones were broken. It was so miserable. The woman in the long dress in the distance narrowed her eyes, as if she couldn't bear to see it. "Is it fun to step on a woman?" Lin Sun asked with deep and indifferent eyes. As he spoke, he shook his wrist, and the black-clothed man hit the ground with his head again. His neck was almost broken, and the nearby ground was shaken to the point that it completely collapsed. It could be imagined how terrible the force was. The black-clothed man was already beyond recognition. His whole body was broken, and blood kept flowing out. He saw stars in front of his eyes. It seemed that he had been beaten silly and was dying. In the distance, Ching Fu, whose bones were broken by Lin Sun, couldn't help but gasp at this moment. His fierce eyes couldn't help showing fear at this moment. He knew very well how powerful the black-clothed man was, but he was abused like a chicken or a dog by Lin Sun. That scene gave him goosebumps all over. "Do you want me to strip you naked and hang you upside down in front of Chaotian City to show the world?" Lin Sun asked with a smile. Xiang Xiaoyuan was his friend, but he had been trampled by this man before. That humiliating scene also aroused Lin Sun's killing intent. Lin Sun lifted the black-clothed man and was about to smash him. In the distance, the slightly mediocre man who had been standing silently beside the woman in the long skirt finally couldn't help rushing over. After all, the black-clothed man was on their side. He couldn't be killed in front of them like this. Lin Sun looked up at the man in the long skirt who was rushing over. He shook off the black-clothed man who was about to die, took a deep breath, and rushed forward. As early as he arrived in the field, he had noticed that the woman in the long skirt might be the most distinguished one, but the man in the long skirt was the most dangerous one. Whoosh! The man in the long skirt walked calmly. He seemed to be slow, but in fact he was extremely fast. His slightly mediocre face was calm, but when he took action, it was like a sword coming out of Silent Box. Indescribable, horrible breath rushed out of his body, tearing the sky and penetrating all directions. He was like a king of emperors patrolling the world. He just raised his hand, made a seal with his 5 fingers, and pressed it in the void. Boom! The heavens and the earth were like fragile glass that blasted apart with a bang. A green-colored palm print flashed out, and it was crystalline and translucent. It revealed a perfect and invulnerable feeling. All the sharpness, all the Taoist techniques were contained within this palm print. As for Lin Sun, he also released all his cultivation at this moment and punched out a punch that was like an abyss or a cauldron, vast and chaotic. The collision of the two was like a battle between two gods. The world was completely destroyed by the torrent of destruction like a piece of paper. All the scenes showed a great collapse and chaos. If it happened in the outside world, this blow alone could destroy a world, until the smoke and dust dispersed. A figure stood in the void like a holy mountain, majestically fluctuating. Only his robe and long hair fluttered in the wind. A hint of surprise appeared in his eyes at this moment. It was the man in the long skirt. In the far distance, there was also a figure standing. However, when she saw this figure was also intact, the woman in the long skirt holding the scroll showed a rare change of expression. Chapter 2635. The tall figure was like an immortal, ethereal, and otherworldly. When he stood in the air, he gave off a feeling that he could suppress everything. The woman in the long dress gripped the yellowed scroll in her hand, a thoughtful look in her eyes. It was also the first time that she showed a serious look since Lin Sun arrived. In the distance, Grasshopper was completely stunned. In his eyes, the linen-robed man was an invincible being. In the eternal world, he was a ferocious emperor, so strong that he was unreasonable. There were many times when Grasshopper couldn't help but suspect that he could smash him to pieces with just a casual strike. But now, the linen-robed man's attack had been blocked, and Lin Sun was unharmed. This fact was like an incomparably heavy blow to Ching Fu, completely shocking her. The black-robed man, who had just escaped death, had been filled with indignation and anger when Lin Sun grabbed him and beat him. But now his eyes were wide open, and he was in a daze. You're only in the 8th tier of ultimate talent, yet you can shake me. Looks like the rumors are true. In the silent atmosphere, the linen-robed man stared at Lin Sun and spoke. This was the first time he had spoken during this period of time, and his voice was as heavy as steel. There was surprise in his eyes, as well as a fighting spirit that had been stirred up. Should I still feel honored after hearing what you said? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows, and a serious look appeared in his eyes. The previous strike had allowed him to determine that the seemingly mediocre linen-robed man in front of him was an ultimate talent great ancestor. This was the second ultimate talent great ancestor Lin Sun had met. The other one was Yun Muzha from the 7th heaven. But strictly speaking, this was the first time Lin Sun had fought against an ultimate talent great ancestor. His unparalleled power was indeed monstrous and dangerous. Compared to the ancestor of a Tao in the ordinary sense, it was a world of difference. In the eternal world, I've only heard that there are people like you among the eternal gods who can surpass the natural chasm of progenitors. But this is just a rumor, and no one can confirm whether it's true or not, the linen-robed man said. However, your appearance proves that the rumors are not baseless. I'll give you a chance. As long as you can last 15 minutes against me, I'll ask the young miss to spare your lives. 15 minutes. This was a declaration of war from one of the great ancestors. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he smiled emotionlessly. I'm just worried that these will be your last words. The cloth-clothed man was unmoved and said, I've never feared death. His eyes were completely calm. Lin Feng, come back. There's no need to continue this battle. In the extreme distance, the woman in a long dress spoke, and her expression was tranquil as before. The linen-clothed man, called Lin Feng, was silent for a moment before he turned around and returned. Such a divine emperor ancestor actually listened to the long-dressed woman's words. Lin Sun was a little surprised. Let's call it a day. What do you think? The woman in the long skirt looked at Lin Sun and asked in a clear voice. Lin Sun laughed and said, Do you think the trouble you cause will end like this? In other words, if I didn't come this time, my friend and the elder would have been tortured to death by you. If he really fought with all his strength, he was sure that he could kill the man named Lin Feng, but he would inevitably pay a heavy price. After all, he was a peerless great ancestor, far more powerful than an ordinary great ancestor. What's more, it was impossible for such a person to not have some powerful trump cards. But Lin Sun didn't want to think about it. He only knew that what happened to Lu Xiangxue and Xiang Xiaoyuan was caused by him. So he should be the one to avenge them. You're courting death. Ching Fu couldn't help saying. He couldn't believe that Lin Sun was so confident to pursue this matter. Ching Fu, come here, the woman in the long skirt said. Ching Fu was stunned, but he still walked over and said, Miss, did I say something wrong again? The woman in the long skirt shook her head. I saved your life because you are the one I chose, but your previous performance disappointed me. Ching Fu's heart trembled, and he said, Miss, as long as I seize the opportunity, I will definitely have a chance to prove the great ancestor. Crack! As soon as he finished speaking, his neck was twisted and broken. In an instant, Ching Fu's pupils opened wide and revealed an expression of disbelief. At the instant before his death, he finally saw clearly that the person who killed him was the man in plain clothes, Lin Feng. But he was utterly unable to figure out why Lin Feng wanted to kill him. Bang! In the next moment, Ching Fu transformed into ash that scattered into the air. This! The dark-clothed man who was heavily injured and on the verge of death shivered. He was shocked by this cruel scene, and he similarly felt bewildered and indescribable terror. Why? He didn't dare ask, as he was deeply afraid that he would suffer calamity if he did. How about this? The woman in the long skirt who held the scroll in her hand looked at Lin Sun. The death of an extremely ferocious and peerless 8th-level Great Emperor like Qing Fu seemed to be unable to arouse even a trace of emotion in her. After witnessing all of this, and then looking at the woman in the long skirt who was elegant like an orchid and had a composed bearing, a trace of coldness arose in Lin Sun's heart. This woman seemed to be graceful and quiet, yet she was actually an extremely ruthless figure. This kind of ruthlessness was a kind of indifference to the creatures in the world. Even the dazzling 8th-level Great Emperor. In her eyes, Qing Fu was also a figure who could kill others. I'm curious, why did you do this? Lin Sun asked. The woman in the long skirt smiled slightly and said, He made me lose face. How about this reason? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and said, Then why didn't you kill him too? He looked at the black-clothed man, whose face suddenly became extremely ugly. He was so angry that he couldn't wait to eat Lin Sun alive. The woman in the long skirt said, Although he was defeated, he still has the potential to become stronger in the future. I don't want to lose such a friend. The black-clothed man suddenly felt relieved, as if he had walked on the edge of death before. Friend, Lin Sun sneered. People like you are doomed to have no friends. Maybe. The woman in the long skirt answered casually. Your strength has been recognized by me. If you want, I can take you to the 8th heaven for cultivation, and I can also provide you with resources to prove the peerless Great Emperor ancestor. Lin Sun was stunned and asked, Do you think I will be willing? The woman in the long skirt looked at Lin Sun seriously and said, Things in this world are unpredictable. To be honest, I never fail to get what I want. She continued, You can think about it carefully. If you haven't made a decision by the end of the God's Relic, I can only help you make a decision. After that, she turned around and left, holding the scroll in one hand and the other hand behind her back. Her long skirt fluttered and she looked calm. The linen-clothed man, Lin Feng, followed closely behind. The black-clothed man walked at the end. But when he left, he glanced at Lin Sun with a complicated look, which was mixed with hatred and a trace of inexplicable jealousy. Lin Sun stood still and watched them leave. In the end, he didn't stop them. Not to mention the plain-clothed man, Lin Feng. Even the woman in the long dress gave him an unfathomable feeling, and he even faintly felt a sense of danger. Lin Sun hadn't experienced this feeling for a long time. He knew clearly that this woman probably had the power to threaten him. The 8th heaven. It seems that she comes from an immortal force. Lin Sun thought and turned around to leave. On the bank of a huge lake that looked like a mirror made of green jade. Thank you, Brother Lin, Xiang Xiaoyuan said gratefully. She knew very well that if it wasn't for Lin Sun, she and Lu Xiangqu wouldn't have a chance to survive. Speaking of which, it's also because of me that you and Senior Lu Xiangqu were implicated. Lin Sun sighed softly. He took out some precious healing medicines and handed them to Xiang Xiaoyuan and Lu Xiangqu. Young friend, don't say these words again. I, Lu Xiangqu, will never forget today's kindness. Lu Xiangqu sat cross-legged on the ground and was recuperating. Lin Sun shook his head and changed the topic. Senior, do you know the origin of those people? A trace of bitterness and fear flashed in Lu Xiangqu's eyes, and he said, If I still can't recognize the identity of that woman, I will have lived in vain. Next, he told them about the origin of the woman in the long skirt. This woman's name is Qi Lingyun, and she comes from the Qi clan, one of the immortal giants of the 8th heaven. She is also a core member of the Qi clan. Her father is a supreme existence in the 8th heaven, possessing unimaginable monstrous power. Among the 10 immortal giants of the 8th heaven, the Qi clan can also be ranked in the top 3. Since ancient times, it has been rumored that the ancestor of the Qi clan was a divine child from the eternal god clan of the 9th heaven. As the daughter of the patriarch of the Qi clan, Qi Lingyun's identity is very special and extraordinary. After understanding this, Lin Sun finally understood why Lu Xiangqu only felt bitterness and fear after suffering such great humiliation. Even if he is an elder of the Lu Xiangqu in the 7th heaven, In the face of the daughter of an immortal giant in the eighth heaven, he is destined to swallow his anger and be unable to retaliate. Otherwise, he is afraid that the entire Lu Xiangxue will be implicated. In this regard, although Lin Sun doesn't agree with it, he also understands. After all, an elder like Lu Xiangxue must consider the safety of the clan before doing anything. As for Lin Feng, he is a legendary figure from an immortal emperor clan in the fifth heaven. A long time ago, before this person became an ancestor, he showed a dazzling light that shocked the entire fifth heaven. He was chosen by a great figure of the Qi clan and brought to the Qi clan of the eighth heaven to cultivate. Today, Lin Feng can be regarded as a member of the Qi clan, following Qi Lingyun and serving her. He seems to be a subordinate, but in the eyes of others, being able to cultivate in the Qi clan is like a carp leaping through the dragon gate, reaching the pinnacle of life. Even the Lin clan, which was originally located in the fifth heaven and could only be regarded as an ordinary immortal emperor clan, has been continuously expanding over the years because of Lin Feng. As the saying goes, when one person achieves the Tao, his chickens and dogs also rise to heaven.